Chapter 513, The Method to Save Lu Chonghu. Ignoring everyone's shock, Zhang Xian reached the ceiling and touched the mechanism. Then, his fingers began operating swiftly, tapping on various protrusions on the ceiling. Possessing the library of Heaven's Path, Zhang Xian could easily find the flaws within a mechanical trap. It was just like with the crimson metal coffin before. Even though it was known to be unbreakable, in truth, if one were to find the flaws and exploit them, it wouldn't be a problem at all. This mechanism was the same as well. Kacha. After a few taps, a crisp sound echoed and a boulder slowly split open, revealing a passageway. Zhang Xian immediately dived into it. The passageway was completely dark. There should be another mechanical system installed above the passageway to prevent the lake water from collapsing in. After walking several dozen meters, he saw a gigantic boulder. As long as he knocked the boulder open, he should be able to return back to the bottom of the lake. Just like with the entrance, there was a unique mechanical system installed here which allowed humans to pass but prevented the lake water from gushing in. Formidable. Taking a brief sweep of the mechanical system, Zhang Xian realized that its design wasn't inferior even when compared to formations. He couldn't help but feel awed. As expected of a celestial designer. Some of the systems behind the mechanical traps were so complex that many men wouldn't get it even if they spent their entire life studying them. After recuperating for a moment and recovering from the massive expenditure from the red dust heaven ascending steps, Zhang Xian finally returned back to the crowd once more. He took a rope from Luo Zhu and fastened it to the passageway. The group didn't hesitate and hurriedly climbed up. They were all cultivators, so even though they weren't capable of flight, scaling a rope was extremely simple. Swimming up the lake, they finally returned back to the shore. Everything they just went through suddenly felt like an illusion, as though a dream they'd all had. Even though they were only in the Soul Oracle tomb for a short moment, they had been on the verge of death and experienced despair. To think that they would be able to see the surface once more. Thank you, Zhang Shi. After drying his clothes with Zhenqi, Hall Master Sai stepped forward and bowed earnestly. As expected of a celestial master teacher. In the face of such danger, unlike the rest of them, he was able to maintain his calmness and use his wits to twist the situation around. Through doing so, he even managed to turn a 6-star Soul Oracle into his servant. If he hadn't witnessed it with his own eyes, he wouldn't dare believe this to be true. You're being too polite, everyone has worked hard as well. Since we are in no hurry to leave, why don't we rest here for the night? After all that they had gone through, the sun had already set. Stars shone brightly in the sky, and a crescent moon was hanging above the top of the mountain. The atmosphere felt peaceful. There was a slight scent of autumn in the air. Green had faded from the leaves on the trees, turning into a more yellowish shade. A mountain wind blew past, caressing the group with a chilly touch. All right. Hearing that they were in no rush to leave, the crowd heaved a sigh of relief. Their mind had been tense during the entire time in the Soul Oracle tomb, and that had left them in a withered state. They felt even more exhausted than if they had fought an intense battle. This was the demon sink beast's nest, and there weren't any spirit beasts who would dare to wreak havoc here. Everyone started a campfire and whipped out the food they had stored in their storage ring. Before long, the fragrance of meat began wafting in the air. Zhang Xian was also ravenous. While he was in the midst of digging into his food, Wang Ying suddenly walked over and asked concernedly, "Teacher, what's wrong with your neck?" Neck? Taken aback, Zhang Xian grabbed the copper mirror that Wang Ying offered him and observed his neck carefully. Below his lower jaw, there was a portion that was slightly gray. Oh, it is caused by Little Mo's Soul Oracle aura. Don't worry, it'll fade away very soon. Back when they were still in the Soul Oracle tomb, in order to bait Emo Hunsheng so as to use the dragon scale amulet against him, he allowed the other party to grab him. It was probably then that the mark was left behind. Even so, it wasn't very conspicuous and one wouldn't notice it unless when paying close attention to it. It was only because of Wang Ying's meticulousness that she noticed it. A soul oracle was a very different life form from a human being, and coming into contact with such a powerful soul oracle, it was perfectly normal for a mark to be left behind. However, it should gradually disappear soon. That's good. Seeing that it wasn't a major issue, Wang Ying heaved a sigh of relief. I need you and Xiaoye to bring Lu Chong over. Meanwhile, I'll investigate some things, Zhang Xian instructed. Lu Chong didn't come here along with the crowd. Instead, he was placed on the back of Zhao Feiwu's spirit beast. Now that the demon sink beast was tamed, it posed no threat whatsoever anymore. Thus, it shouldn't be a problem for them to bring him over. Yes. Knowing her teacher's intention to save Lu Chong, Wang Ying nodded her head. After delegating several tasks, Zhang Xian stepped into the demon sink beast's cave. The cave was wide and clean. Finding himself a quiet place, Zhang Xian took out the 9 hearts lotus. He didn't have any time to ask Emo Hunching anything when they were in the tomb previously. Since he had some time now, he could properly question him to see if there was any way to save Lu Chong. Master. Upon leaving the storage ring, Emo Hunching immediately realized that he was out of the tomb and a tinge of excitement could be heard in his tone. After being trapped for several dozen millenniums, he finally managed to see the surface once more. The agitation he was feeling at the moment was unimaginable. As such, his use of the master was completely earnest, there wasn't the slightest sarcasm or insincerity in it. I want to know if you have any way of waking a dormant soul. Zhang Xian asked with a grim expression. Wake a dormant soul? Emo Huncheng was stunned for a moment before replying, to wake a dormant soul, you just have to send your soul into the other party's body to wake him up. It isn't too complicated. Zhang Xian fell into contemplation. In truth, he knew of this method as well. But back then, his soul was still unable to leave his body, so he could only drop the idea. But now everything was different. Having cultivated the Heaven's Path soul art, his soul could already exist separately from his body. He could easily enter the Lu Chang's body to wake up his soul. However, this action is very similar to possession. The slightest mistake might result in you taking over control of the other party's body instead. Bound to Zhang Xian by the soul contract, Emo Huncheng didn't dare to hide anything from the other party. Sending a soul into another person's body was an action no different from possession. It was still alright if one could wake up the other party, but if it failed, it was very possible that a possession would really take place, and the intruding soul would suffer from possession decline. More importantly, if you fail to wake the other party up, your soul might just be acknowledged by the other party's body. If so, it would be impossible to wake the other party up anymore. Emo Huncheng hesitated for a moment before continuing. After all, a soul capable of intruding into the body of another has to be incredibly powerful. Furthermore, given that the other party's soul is in a dormant state, he must be completely defenseless at the moment. A body which hasn't been nourished by a soul for a very long time is extremely likely to acknowledge the wrong master. If that happens, not only will you fail to save the other party, you might even directly cause his death. With a grim expression, Zhang Xian clenched his fist tightly. Is there any way to avoid that from happening? Since he was going to make a move, he should ensure that there was 100% chance of success. If he were to fail, how could he face his own conscience? After all, he was the cause of Lu Chang's current plight. If he failed to treat his own student, he should be ashamed of being the other party's teacher. Avoid that from happening? If the other party's soul becomes resilient and powerful, then even if you fail to wake his soul up, he should still be in control of his physical body. At the very least, a possession won't occur. Emo Huncheng said. The best method is to use soulrouse grass to forge soulrouse incense. If you were to light the incense and allow the person with a dormant soul to breathe it in first, there will be a significantly higher chance of waking him up. Soulrouse grass. Zhang Xian frowned. As an apothecary, he had browsed through many herbology books, but he had never heard of such a medicinal herb before. Soulrouse grass isn't a plant but a unique object bred through the nurturing of a soul oracle's soul. Mo Hunching said. How long does it take to grow one? Zhang Xian asked. If it took too long, he would have to resort to other alternative solutions. Not too long, just a month. However, my soul is trapped within the lotus, so I am unable to grow one. Mo Hunching smiled bitterly. Even if he wanted to help, trapped in the 9 hearts lotus, he was completely powerless. Instead of replying the other party's words, Zhang Xian asked, can all soul oracles nurture one? Yes. As long as one is a soul oracle who has succeeded in drawing his soul out, one will be able to nurture it. The method is extremely simple, I'll tell you about it now. Mo Hunching said. Zhang Xian shook his hands and said calmly, tell me the method. All right. Thus, Mo Hunching began speaking. Very quickly, he explained the entire process for breeding a soul rouse grass. Just as he'd said, the soul rouse grass wasn't a specific plant but an object bred through the nurturing of one's soul. Only then would it harmonize with one's soul and achieve the purpose of waking up a soul. It can't be that you're thinking of learning the soul guiding formula to become a soul oracle and nurture one. Seeing that his master had jotted the cultivation method for the soul rouse grass down, Mo Huncheng was taken aback. That's right. Zhang Xian nodded his head. Since this object was useful to Lu Chong, he did have the intention to plant it. But you're a celestial master teacher. Mo Huncheng was shocked out of his wits. His master was a talented celestial master teacher. If he were to cultivate the soul guiding formula, that would be equivalent to giving up his identity. Wasn't that being a little too reckless? Don't worry, I've already revised the soul guiding formula. Even if I were to succeed in drawing out my soul, it won't have any adverse effect on my physical body such that my soul will still be able to harmonize perfectly with the body, Zhang Xian said calmly. Revised? Harmonize perfectly. Within the lotus, Mo Huncheng's eyes widened into perfect circles and his lips quivered in disbelief. The soul guiding formula was the cultivation technique that was passed down among soul oracles for innumerable years. Countless experts had revised and improved it, but even so, they were unable to get past this bottleneck. Yet, just by studying the formula for a few breaths, this fellow had actually revised it such that it didn't affect the compatibility between one's body and soul. How was that possible? Just as he was thinking that the other party might be bragging, he saw his master's body suddenly sway and an intangible shadow suddenly appeared above the body. He drew his soul out. The voice trembled. As a 6-star soul oracle, he could clearly see that his master's soul had already separated from his body. Can you see me? Just as he was overwhelmed with shock, the other party's soul voice sounded. Then, Zhang Xian stepped forward and sat in front of the lotus. I can see you now. Mo Huncheng trembled. Zhang Xian nodded his head in satisfaction. It seemed like the soul he drew out using the Heaven's Path soul art was similar to his Heaven's Path Shinchi. As long as he willed it to be so, if he wished to conceal his soul, even a higher-ranked soul oracle would be unable to see him. On the other hand, he could also choose to reveal it as well. Who? After confirming this fact, Zhang Xian returned back to his physical body. Return of the soul, perfect consummation, concord of acupoints, harmony of body and soul. You really managed to improve the soul guiding formula. Seeing that Zhang Xian's soul had returned back into his body without any problems, and his souls were even calling in harmony, producing a sound reminiscent of the call of a dragon, Mo Huncheng screeched in shock and he nearly fainted on the spot. Chapter 5:14, But they are both men. The normal soul guiding formula would cause one's physical body to decline swiftly as soon as the soul was drawn out of the body. Yet, the person before him was still filled with vitality from head to toe. His acupoints were in concord, and his soul and physical body were in harmony. Not only was he not inferior to any transcendent mortal cultivator, his disposition even seemed more refined. His presence seemed to create immense pressure on other souls. With just a single look, Mo Huncheng could immediately tell that the soul guiding formula that the other party cultivated was different from his. It had already been improved such that the concept of 5 soul declines was non-existent. It was at a whole new level. Legend had it that the founding father of soul oracles, Lu Mozi, had stolen the knowledge of souls from the heaven's path to create the occupation. However, due to the imperfection of heaven, the content he stole was incomplete, thus resulting in the 5 soul declines and the incompatibility between one's soul and body. The soul oracles in the latter generations tried many means to improve the soul guiding formula but to no avail. Yet, the young man before him had only taken a momentary look, and not only did he manage to rid it of all its fatal flaw, he even succeeded in cultivating it. How could he not be surprised? How in the world did you do it? After the shock came deep excitement. A celestial master teacher who is capable of improving the soul guiding formula, just his strength and knowledge in itself can probably bring me to greater heights. The reason why he established a soul contract with the other party was out of helplessness before. However, upon seeing the other party's capability and means, he suddenly realized that this might have been the most correct decision in his life. Following such a talented figure, if he were to earn the other party's favor and guidance, he would definitely be able to surpass his previous bottleneck. These are the secret techniques that I have uncovered through my years of research. It might prove useful to master. Thinking so, Mo Hunsheng immediately transmitted his knowledge over via his soul. Soul oracles were capable of transmitting information directly through their souls. This method was much more efficient than reading books or verbal explanation. Due to the contract forming a bridge between them, this transfer of information was exceptionally efficient. Zhang Xian felt his eyes blur for a moment when in the next instant, a huge gush of information appeared in his head. They were all regarding soul oracles. Mo Hunsheng was a 6-star soul oracle from the ancient times. Back then, the inheritance hadn't been terminated yet, so the knowledge he knew covered nearly everything regarding the occupation. As expected of a feared occupation, it is indeed deep and profound. After briefly looking through it, Zhang Xian's mouth widened in shock. It was no wonder why the lineage of this occupation could be passed down for innumerable generations, even becoming a subject of fear beyond that of poison masters. Soul oracles were indeed not to be trifled with. In comparison to all of this, soul guiding formula was indeed just the foundation. Suddenly, Zhang Xian saw something and turned to the lotus. Did you create this soul severing technique? That fellow had been trapped in the 9 hearts lotus for dozens of millenniums, and it was due to his intense desire to escape that he studied this technique for innumerable years so that he could sever a part of his soul to escape from the lotus. I created it through innumerable trial and error. Mo Hunsheng nodded. Using this formula, one can create another of oneself such that even if the main soul is destroyed in the future, one can still maintain his existence through this clone. Clone? Zhang Xian was taken aback. That's right. This severed soul is a complete replica of oneself, possessing even one's complete memories. In other words, it's equivalent to creating a spare soul. If you were to meet with danger, this can serve as your trump card, so it isn't too bad, Mo Hunsheng said. Zhang Xian nodded his head. He quickly looked through the soul-severing technique. That skill was indeed incredible. Only one who had achieved a profound understanding of souls could create such a skill. From the looks of it, if it wasn't for this fellow being trapped within the 9 hearts lotus and was unable to cultivate, given his accumulation over a course of several dozen millenniums, he could have been an 8-star or even 9-star soul oracle by now. But that was to be expected. Being trapped during this entire period of time, all he had been focused on was how he could free himself from this hell. If his understanding of souls didn't make any progress, he would truly be a hopeless cause. Let me see how many flaws there are. Submerging his consciousness into his mind, he entered the library of Heaven's Path and imprinted the knowledge which the other party sent him onto blank books. After which, he grabbed the book regarding the soul-severing technique and flipped it open. Soul-severing technique, created by Mo Hunsheng. Upon mastering the technique, one will be able to divide one's soul into 2 flaws. A huge amount of information was detailed on it. Reading through the content, Zhang Xian couldn't help but praise, only 120 flaws, that's rather formidable. To create a technique possessing only 100 flaws through one's individual efforts, even though Mo Hunsheng may seem unreliable, his talent and capability were indeed top-notch. How could a 6-star soul oracle possibly be ordinary anyway? Compile. With a thought, Zhang Xian fused all of the books regarding souls together to recompile the soul-severing technique. Taking another look at it once more. There were only 10 flaws or so left in it. Seems like my books regarding souls are still sorely lacking. I should get someone to buy more for me when I arrive at the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. Regarding the soul-severing technique being able to be used as a life preservation method, Zhang Xian was rather surprised. It was impossible for any cultivator to completely stay out of harm's way. If he were to successfully cultivate this technique, he would have another ace up his sleeves. However, there were too many flaws with this cultivation technique, so he wasn't interested in it for the moment. Even if he wanted to cultivate it, he would have to collect more books and make up for its deficiencies first. Now, time to look at the 9 Hearts Lotus. Given the humongous quantity of information that the other party sent over, Zhang Xian knew that it was impossible for him to look through all of them in just a day or two. Thus, opening his eyes, he turned his attention to the Black Lotus instead. A 6-star soul oracle had called this item a god artifact. Zhang Xian was interested to see what effects it had. Thus, coming into contact with it, he muttered, "Flaws. Who?" A book appeared in the Library of Heaven's Path. 9 Heaven's Lotus Embryo, an object descended from the celestial. It requires the nourishment of the purest energy to grow, and upon mature, it could be used to craft the most perfect physical body. Flaws. Number 1, it has yet to reach maturity, which is indicated by a white outer appearance, so, it's not called 9 Hearts Lotus but 9 Heaven's Lotus Embryo. The part regarding it being able to be used to craft physical body turns out to be true. After reading through the first page, Zhang Xian nodded his head. From the looks of it, even though Mo Hunsheng had been trapped within the lotus for more than several dozen millenniums, he was still unable to recognize it entirely. 9 Heaven's Lotus Embryo, even though its exact level wasn't stated within the book, it seemed to be a high-tiered object. To think that there would be only 5 flaws. Flipping to the second page, Zhang Xian was just about to continue reading when he froze. There were only 2 pages detailing the 5 flaws of the object. This was Zhang Xian's first time seeing an object with so few flaws. As expected of a god artifact, with eyes reddened in agitation, a thought suddenly appeared in Zhang Xian's mind: if I were to learn the soul-severing technique and create a clone while nurturing this lotus to serve as its body, wouldn't it be equivalent to gaining another life? The more Zhang Xian thought of it, the more agitated he felt. If he were to nurture this god artifact which only had 5 flaws to create a clone for himself, wouldn't his fighting prowess immediately soar? It's a pity that I probably won't live to the day that this lotus matures. One of the flaws written in the book was that the 9 Heavens Lotus Embryo had yet to mature. A mature 9 Heavens Lotus Embryo should be completely white, but the lotus was currently pitch black in color. After consuming Mo Hunsheng's entire fortune and living for several dozen millenniums, it was still in this state. Given Zhang Xian's lifespan of several hundred years, it would be impossible for him to live until its maturity. It would be impossible to mold it before the lotus reaches maturity. If he were to try it forcefully, he might just end up like Mo Hunsheng, trapped in the lotus and losing his freedom, unable to even end his own life. Thinking so, a thought suddenly appeared in Zhang Xian's mind. This lotus requires the nourishment of the purest energy to reach maturity. My Heaven's Path Shinqi is incomparably pure. Will it suffice as a fertilizer for it? In the description regarding the 9 Heavens Lotus Embryo, in the very first line, it was stated that the lotus required nourishment from the purest energy to mature. Zhang Xian didn't have sufficient spirit stones to feed it, but the Heaven's Path Shinqi was incomparably pure. He could definitely give it a try. Thus, grabbing the stem of the lotus, Zhang Xian sent a surge of Zhinqi in. Ah! As soon as the Zhinqi seeped in, a loud shriek echoed in the air. I've already said all that has to be said, please don't kill me. Mo Hunsheng was about to go mad. He had only just handed over the information regarding soul oracles when the other party infused his Jinqi into the lotus at the next instant. There was not a single person in his position who wouldn't think that Zhang Xian was trying to kill him now that his worth had been completely extracted. Realizing the significance of his actions, Zhang Xian hurriedly stopped. He had only been thinking of nourishing the lotus with his Jinqi. He forgot about the existence of the fellow inside. Soul oracles carried innate fear of heaven's path Jinqi, and not to mention, this fellow had been severely injured by the dragon scale amulet. Thus, how could he possibly be able to withstand the onslaught of Jinqi? It was already a blessing that he wasn't eradicated in an instant. Stopping the flow of Jinqi, Zhang Xian was just about to put the lotus back into his storage ring and study it more next time when he saw that the stem where he infused Jinqi into previously had already turned white. It turned white? Could heaven's path Jinqi really be effective? Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. In a state of disbelief, he grabbed another stem and infused Jinqi into the lotus. A terrifying scream of agony sounded from the lotus once more. A moment later, Zhang Xian grabbed the lotus. It has turned white as well. Indeed, heaven's path Jinqi can hasten the maturity of this object. Looking at the white stems, Zhang Xian was delighted. Then, turning to Mo Hunsheng, he consoled, I'm not trying to kill you, I'm just experimenting with this 9 hearts lotus. There's no need for you to be anxious, I'm just giving it a try. Just a short moment, don't. Mo Hunsheng cried. I'll listen to you obediently in the future, alright? If you were to give it more tries, there will be no need for you to get me out of the lotus anymore. I would have already died by then at the opening of the cave. Did something happen? Should we take a look? It sounds like Mo Hunsheng's shout of agony. Is Zhang Shi alright? Hearing the shout of agony, the group who was in the midst of their meal stood up. Zhang Shi said previously that there are some things he needs to investigate, so it's best for us not to interrupt him. Why don't we first try to determine the current situation inside before coming to a decision? Zhao Feiwu advised everyone with a grim expression. Everyone nodded their heads and pricked their ears. After which, they vaguely heard a faint voice. There's no need for you to be anxious, I'm just giving it a try. Just a short moment, don't. Give a try. Short moment? No need to be anxious. Everyone stared at one another with widened eyes. Zhao Feiwu's face turned red, and it took her a while before she managed to speak. But the both of them are men. Chapter 515, Zhao Feiwu's true identity. After testing it for a bit, Zhang Xian confirmed that the change in the 9 heavens lotus embryo was due to the heavens path Jinqi. Only then did he stop with eyes glowing in excitement. Possessing both the method of nurturing the lotus and to sever a portion of his soul, it was now just a matter of time before he succeeded in creating a clone. But before that, he had to find a way to get Mo Hunsheng out of the lotus first. Otherwise, as soon as he infused Jinqi into the lotus, an ear-piercing cry could echo in the air. Most probably, before the lotus could even mature, the person trapped inside would have already died. In the end, a transcendent mortal, a 9-dan expert servant, even if he was no longer as strong as before, was still better than nothing at all. However, he had no way of getting Mo Hunsheng out now. Thus, Zhang Xian turned his attention to the soul oracle cultivation technique. I should first cultivate the soul oracle cultivation technique first so that I can nurture a soul rouse grass. The soul guiding formula that he had cultivated before was similar to the fire's Jushi realm. If one couldn't even absorb spiritual energy, one could never become a fighter. Similarly, if one couldn't draw out his soul, one possessed no aptitude whatsoever in becoming a soul oracle. Soul guiding formula was just a technique to draw one's soul out of his body. To strengthen one's soul, one would require another whole new set of cultivation techniques. As a 6-star soul oracle, Mo Hunsheng had many soul cultivation techniques in his arsenal. Adding his understanding of soul cultivation into the mix, Zhang Xian managed to gather 1,000 books to compile together. After organizing them, Zhang Xian realized that he had the perfected Heaven's Path soul art all the way until Transcendent Mortal 2 Dan. Beyond 2 Dan, there were some mistakes here and there in the cultivation techniques, thus making them unsuitable to learn. That's around the level of my current cultivation. I should start now. Zhang Xian happened to be at Transcendent Mortal 1 Dan pinnacle at the moment. If his soul were to reach the same level, he could exert the strength of both his Jinqi and his soul simultaneously, and this could boost his fighting prowess significantly. Seated cross-legged on the floor, Zhang Xian drew his soul out and began cultivating via the method detailed in the Heaven's Path soul art. Tzzzzzzzz. His soul energy swiftly surged. After an unknown period of time. Who? Zhang Xian's soul returned back to his body and he slowly opened his eyes. It was already daybreak. Sunlight shone in from the entrance of the cavern, blinding Zhang Xian's eyes. After a year of cultivation, my soul cultivation has reached Transcendent Mortal 2 Dan. Given that Zhang Xian had the complete Heaven's Path soul art all the way until Transcendent Mortal 2 Dan, as well as a middle-tier spirit stone to fuel his cultivation, in just a night's effort, Zhang Xian had already reached Transcendent Mortal 2 Dan. In other words, his soul cultivation was currently beyond his current cultivation. However, being a soul oracle is a taboo in the continent. It's best for me not to use the ability of a soul oracle recklessly. Just like poison masters, soul oracles were a feared existence. If someone were to know that Zhang Xian was able to draw his soul out and his soul possessed fighting power on its own, in the worst-case scenario, he might even be unable to keep his master-teacher license. Thus, unless when put in a desperate situation, Zhang Xian was determined not to resort to this method. I can start cultivating the soul rouse grass now. Stretching his back lazily, Zhang Xian stood up. Mo Hunsheng had already imparted the method of cultivating the soul rouse grass to him. In truth, soul rouse grass didn't refer to a specific medicinal herb but one nurtured using one's soul. A herb cultivated through such means would possess the attribute of rousing dormant souls. But the medicinal herb used couldn't just be any plant. It had to be one that was able to harness one's soul energy. Such medicinal herbs were hard to find, and so, he could only try looking through the market of the Myriad Kingdom city when he arrived there. Walking out of the cavern, Zhang Xian realized that everyone was awake. All of the fright and fatigue from the journey to the Soul Oracle tomb had disappeared through a night of rest, and the group seemed revitalized. They had already completed all preparations for departure. Let's go to the Myriad Kingdom city, Zhang Xian said. Everyone jumped onto the back of Zhao Feiwu's spirit beast and soared into the sky. The demon Sync beast also follows suit as well. As for Hall Master Sai and Luo Zhu, they had already heard of the Master-Teacher tournament and they were interested in spectating it as well. Thus, they decided to tag along. Voila! The spirit beast looked as though a black line shooting through the sky. With the notorious demon Sync beast protecting them, there wasn't a single savage beast or spirit beast who dared to trifle with the group. In fact, even the experts riding on spirit beasts made sure to keep their distance upon sensing the deep hostility the demon Sync beast was emanating. Thus, the journey went smoothly without any hiccups. 5 days later, a massive city appeared before everyone's eyes. This city was even grander than Honghai City, and all kinds of infrastructures were ordered neatly in a specific pattern, creating a beautiful sight. Looking out of the window from the beast's back, Zhang Xian could see that the massive city was located in the midst of a giant plain. It seemed as though a clean and massive river flowing through the middle of the plains, bringing it boundless vitality and liveliness. The Myriad Kingdom Alliance has embassies from all of the countries that it trades with. There are also markets established by powers of equal standing here. In fact, Tier 2 Huanyu Empire even has a supply point here. There are many powers in the city, but regardless of who they are, as long as they are in Myriad Kingdom City, they have to obey the orders of the Alliance head residents. Zhao Feiwu chuckled. Zhang Xian nodded. He had heard of the Alliance head residence. It was known as the royalty of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, the one that wielded true power within the Alliance. He had heard of it from Su Shi back when he was in Tianwu Kingdom. Even though Master-Teacher Pavilion possessed an esteemed standing, they didn't interfere in governance. Usually, as long as there was no social upheaval, they wouldn't get involved in anything. As such, the power was mainly held in the hands of the Alliance head. There is still some time before the Master-Teacher tournament. Why don't you all follow me to the Alliance head residence to rest for a few days? You can use these days to look into the situation before heading to the Master-Teacher Pavilion, Zhao Feiwu said. There were still another 2 months before the Master-Teacher tournament, so there was no need to hurry. Alliance head residence? Could Zhao Gongzi be someone from the Alliance head residence? Hall Master Sai asked doubtfully. Zhao Feiwu had always been following behind Zhang Shi. All along, the rest had thought that she was Zhang Xian's friend, unaware that she was a local of the Myriad Kingdom city. Even Zhao Ye and the others only know that Zhao Gongzi was an envoy from the Alliance. They were unaware of her real identity as well. Yes. The Alliance head, Zhao Tianhao, is my father. Zhao Feiwu replied. You are Alliance head Zhao's son. That's not right. Alliance head Zhao only has a single son, Zhao Hui Gongzi, and I've met him before. Hall Master Sai was taken aback. Alliance head Zhao was the most influential person throughout the entire Myriad Kingdom Alliance. His son was in a position similar to the Crown Prince, and as the head of the Appraiser Hall, Hall Master Sai had met him several times before. Zhao Feiwu clearly wasn't him. I didn't intend to deceive everyone here. Just that, for the sake of convenience, I had no choice but to disguise myself. Chuckling lightly, Zhao Feiwu rubbed her face and her appearance began changing. Her main appearance didn't change much, but her features became from feminine, betraying her identity as a female. Even though she was still wearing male clothes, her disposition and her appearance were no different from a female. Her complexion was perfect, and she was no way inferior even when compared to Princess Mou. You are a woman. Only then did Hall Master Sai, Luo Zhu, Zhao Ye, and the others come to a realization. The only one who was calm amongst them was Zhang Xian. When he first saw the other party, the eye of insight had already revealed her identity as a lady. Thus, he wasn't too surprised by her confession. Zhao Hui is my elder brother, and I am the second princess of the Alliance, Zhao Yan. Zhao Feiwu introduced herself. From young, I've been plagued with an affliction. In hopes that I can live like an ordinary person, he conferred me the title of the Dancing Princess. That's where my name Zhao Feiwu comes from. So, it's Princess Feiwu. Hall Master and Luo Zhu glanced at one another before coming to a realization. They had long heard of the ill second princess of the Alliance head, and according to the rumors, she was suffering from innate muscular deficiency. Despite searching throughout the Alliance, they were unable to find a single physician capable of treating it. As such, when they met Zhao Feiwu, given the other party's gender, they didn't think that it would be her. I've heard that Alliance head Zhao conferred this title to the ill second princess in hopes that she could dance lightly like the elegant swallows. However, it's a pity that despite the reward he's offered, no one has managed to find a cure yet. Why would Hall Master Sai ask doubtfully? Princess Feiwu's illness had shocked many. Countless physicians had stepped forward only to leave in defeat. Logically speaking, she should be confined to her bed, unable to move at all. How could she be walking around as though an ordinary human being? Could there be some falsehood in the rumors? Zhang Shi saved me. Zhao Feiwu chuckled and her bright eyes shone. Oh! Hall Master Sai suddenly came to a realization. After learning of the other party's identity, he had been wondering why the princess, one of the most authoritative figures in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, would follow Zhang Shi around and treat him with utmost respect. The other party's reply had finally solved this lingering doubt of his. I've long heard of Zhang Shi's outstanding medical skills, but I didn't expect you to be so formidable, Hall Master Sai laughed bitterly. Back then, Sun Chang had bragged about how formidable his young master's medical skills were. At the Coax Ridge, he had witnessed with his own eyes how formidable the other party's knockout treatment method was. However, it was only after hearing Princess Fei Wu's words did he truly realize how fearsome Zhang Shi's medical skills were. The princess's innate muscular deficiency had caused a huge uproar throughout the alliance then, and countless physicians had taken a look at her condition only to find that they were helpless against it. Just by the fact that Zhang Shi was able to solve it meant that his medical skills were probably superior to most physicians in the Myriad Kingdom alliance. Zhang Shi, Fei Wu didn't mean to lie to you. I beseech for your forgiveness. After introducing herself, Zhao Fei Wu turned to Zhang Shi and bowed deeply. Even though this young man was of the same age as her, he had already attained a high level of proficiency as a master teacher, physician, appraiser, formation master. He wouldn't even pale in comparison to that famous elder brother of hers. This made her feel awe for the other party. Even though Zhang Xian knew that the other party was a lady, upon learning that she was the princess, he was still rather surprised. Seeing that the other party was speaking to him, Zhang Xian suddenly thought of something. You're being too polite. Since you're the princess, you should be able to gather news easily. I just so happen to have something I need your help to look into. Zhang Shi, feel free to speak. Zhao Fei Wu nodded. It must be said that she was indeed extremely pretty. Even though her cultivation was so-so, she had a valiant disposition which accentuated her aesthetics. After pondering for a moment, Zhang Xian said, I wish to purchase a soul-calming grass, and the greater its maturity, the better it is. Otherwise, sentiment drowning flower would work as well. It'll be best if they have a maturity of 500 years and above. More importantly, they should be fresh and alive. Dried herbs will be useless for my agenda. Can Princess Fei Wu help me look into the matter? To nurture a soul-rouse grass, the medicinal herb must be capable of harnessing one's soul energy. Over the past few days, Zhang Xian had been contemplating over the matter, and in the end, he concluded that it would be easiest to find these two herbs within the Myriad Kingdom alliance. The soul-calming grass and sentiment drowning flower. These two medicinal herbs weren't famous, but they were extremely valuable. As Zhang Xian wasn't well connected in the alliance, it would be difficult for him to find these herbs. On the other hand, as the princess of the alliance, Zhao Fei Wu should be able to find them easily. Soul-calming grass and sentiment drowning flower. Fresh ones. Not expecting Zhang Shi to ask for these things, Zhao Fei Wu frowned. Chapter 5:16. Alliance Head soul-calming grass could calm one's mind, placing one in an imperturbable state. Sentiment drowning flower could stabilize one's mental fortitude, making one less affected by emotional changes. These two medicinal herbs were extremely rare, and there were less than a handful of them in the Myriad Kingdom alliance. For those herbs to be alive and possess a maturity of 500 years on top of that, the difficulty was extremely high. This I'm not too sure either, but when we arrive at the Alliance Head residence, I can ask my father about it. Even if he doesn't know where he can find it, I'm sure he can help you look into it, Zhao Fei Wu replied. Zhang Xian nodded. Her father, as the head of the alliance, wielded immense influence and power. It should be a walk in the park for him to find a single medicinal herb. Thus, Zhang Xian nodded his head and fell silent. Standing quietly by the window, he continued reinforcing his cultivation. Even though he hadn't reached Transcendent Mortal 2 Dan yet, his efforts in the past 5 days had made his Jinqi had become even purer and denser. From his experience with the immense Jinqi consumption from the red dust heaven ascending steps, he realized that on top of purity, the denseness of one's Jinqi was extremely important as well. As such, in the past few days, he had been working hard accumulating his Jinqi into his Dantian. His efforts had increased, the quantity of Jinqi had at least increased by 1/10. One shouldn't underestimate this 1/10. Using the red dust heaven ascending steps as a gauge, it could sustain him for another 2 to 3 breaths. In this time, he could descend back to the ground, thus avoiding a tragic fall. For the rest of the journey, there wasn't much of a conversation among the group. The spirit beast continued proceeding forward, and soon, a grand building appeared in everyone's sight. As the center of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, the Alliance head residence carried an imposing aura. Even before arriving at the location, everyone could already feel a heavy pressure pushing down on them. Chuckling, Zhao Feiwu explained, "Even my spirit beast is not allowed to fly straight into the Alliance head residence. Let's alight here." The spirit beast they were riding on flapped its wings and descended to the ground. Soon, it stopped at a vast square right in front of the Alliance head residence. Jumping off the back of the spirit beast, Zhang Xian scanned the surroundings and was awed. As expected of the center of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. Not only were the buildings towering, they were even infused with spiritual energy. Without even taking a closer examination, it was clear that they were filled with formations. If someone dared to wreak havoc here, the formations would be more than enough to slaughter them. It was no wonder that Zhao Feiwu dared not enter the Alliance head residence riding on the back of a spirit beast. If she were to do so, it would probably trigger some formation. Lifting his gaze, Zhang Xian saw a few soldiers patrolling the Alliance head residence. They were all dressed in gray armor and they had a spear each in their hands. A powerful aura could be felt from them. Zongshe realm experts. Zhang Xian was surprised. To think that even the most ordinary guards here were Zongshe realm experts. No one of Tianxian Kingdom had reached this level, and even in a Tier 2 kingdom where Lu Shi and the others resided in, that was the level of the old ancestor of a country. Yet, over here, they were only an ordinary guard. The huge disparity was truly astonishing. But thinking about it, that was to be expected. After all, the Myriad Kingdom city had 4-star master teachers. Just by listening to the class of such an expert, one's understanding of cultivation would surely experience a huge leap. Surpassing one's bottleneck would become significantly easier. Even if one couldn't listen to the lessons of an expert of that caliber, the lessons of a 2-star and 3-star master teachers were fairly useful as well. Besides, as a prosperous commercial city, the Myriad Kingdom city was rich in resources. As such, it wasn't too surprising for the overall prowess of its population to be much stronger. Zhao Ye and the others had initially thought that Jizuan realm was already formidable. However, after seeing the guards, they couldn't help but feel disheartened. As expected of the capital of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, it was indeed formidable. Your humble servant pays respect to Princess Feiwu and Lord Jin. Just as the group were awed by the sight, a group of soldiers walked over and a golden-armored commander stepped forward and welcomed them. Zhao Wufei's transcendent mortal 3-dan mount was known by everyone in the Alliance head residence. Its presence surely meant that the princess had returned as well. The commander's aura was slightly influencing his surroundings, thus revealing his strong control over the environment. It was clear from this that he was a transcendent mortal expert. Prepare a clean and spiritual energy-rich courtyard for my friends to live in. Make sure to serve them well. Zhao Feiwu commanded impassively. She had never shown this side of her to Zhang Xian and the others, but at this moment, the disposition of an authoritative princess was clearly shown through her movement and words. Yes. The commander nodded his head and hurriedly got into action. Nodding her head, Zhao Feiwu turned around and said, Zhang Shi, let me take you to meet my father. All right. Nodding his head, Zhang Xian delegated some instructions to Zhao Ye and the others before leaving with Zhao Feiwu. The palace wasn't too extravagant, and there weren't many guards here as well. It was extraordinarily peaceful here, reminiscent of a tranquil garden. If not for Zhao Feiwu leading the way and the huge number of guards defending the area outside, Zhang Xian would have thought that he was in the wrong place. My father doesn't like a ruckus, so there aren't any guards here. Besides, this is the Alliance head residence, so there won't be anyone so foolish as to cause trouble here. Noticing Zhang Xian's doubts, Zhao Feiwu chuckled. Zhang Xian nodded his head. Ever since his reincarnation, he had visited various palaces and without an exception, they all had tight security. Yet, this location formed a stark contrast to the norm. It seemed like Zhao Feiwu's father had absolute confidence in his strength. While the both of them chatted, they walked down several corridors and finally arrived at a large hall. Someone entered the hall to report their presence. A moment later, the same person returned and invited them in. Entering the hall, Zhang Xian immediately saw an authoritative-looking middle-aged man seated on the seat at the direct center of the room. He was exuding an exceptionally powerful aura that wasn't inferior even when compared to the demon Sync Beast. Clearly, he had reached Transcendent Mortal Fordan Pinnacle as well. Even when compared to Hall Master Han whom he had seen before, this middle-aged man was clearly much stronger. The both of them might be Transcendent Mortal Fordan Pinnacle experts, but the aura the latter was exuding showed the huge distance between their strength. It was just like how Hall Master Han Chong and the various elders, despite teaming together against the demon Sync Beast, were unable to defeat it. Father. Zhao Feiwu stepped forward and greeted. You've returned. The middle-aged man nodded his head. Then, his bright eyes fell on Zhang Xian. Being in an authoritative position for such a long time, he carried a majestic disposition that naturally commanded fear in others. Even the head of the Physician Guild, guild leader Meng, would stutter in fear before him. Yet, this 20-year-old lad was able to keep his composure. Just by this in itself, he could tell that the other party wasn't a simple figure. Smiling slightly, Alliance head Zhao said, "You must be Zhang Shi." "I am Zhang Xian." "My greetings to the Alliance head." Zhang Xian nodded. Seeing the other party's humble attitude, Alliance head Zhao felt even more satisfied with the young man before him. "I've heard of your affairs. Despite being under 20, you are already a 2-star master teacher. You've challenged Tianwu Kingdom's Wall of Dilemma and solved all of the questions on it, undergone the harmonious stream of flowing goblets and became certified as a 5-star appraiser, and on top of all that, you even managed to save Hall Master Han, not to mention, you cured my daughter of her affliction as well. You're truly a talented man. Alliance Master, I am unworthy of your praise." Zhang Xian felt a little bizarre that the other party knew his affairs so clearly, but after giving it some thoughts, he felt that it was to be expected. After all, his daughter was traveling alone despite having only just recovered from her affliction. Even though Jin Songhai was protecting her, he couldn't help but feel worried. Most likely, he sent some men to keep tabs on his daughter's trail, so it wasn't too surprising for him to know of those matters. Besides, Jin Songhai, as his subordinate, would surely report these matters to him as well. Having been in control of the Alliance for many years, I've seen many geniuses. However, men of Zhang Shi's caliber are indeed rare. Alliance head Zhao complimented. Just as Zhang Xian had thought, Jin Songhai had reported most of the matters that they had gone through. Even though he had excluded the matter regarding the Soul Oracle Tomb and the Celestial Master Teacher, the affairs that he had gone through had shocked the Alliance Master. Despite being under 20, the other party was a 5-star appraiser, quasi-4-star formation master, 3-star painter, 2-star master teacher. His titles and capability could leave anyone and everyone awed. As the most influential person in the Alliance, he had seen countless great geniuses. However, when compared to him, they were all like fireflies before the burning sun. Zhang Shi's aim for coming to Myriad Kingdom City must be to participate in the Master Teacher Tournament, right? After chatting for a moment, Alliance head Zhao asked. Zhang Xian nodded his head. Back then, he had promised Su Shi and Ling Shi on the matter. Since he was already here now, naturally, he should at least participate in it. But more importantly, the reward for the Master Teacher Tournament was generous. The Master Teacher Tournament gathers countless geniuses from the 27 Master Teacher Pavilions. Even though Zhang Shi's talent is outstanding, it probably won't be too easy to rank amidst the top. Speaking of the Master Teacher Tournament, Alliance head Zhao shook his head bitterly. Having read through the other party's background, he knew that the person before of him had outstanding talent. However, getting a good placing among the 28 powers wouldn't be easy. If it was that simple, the Myriad Kingdom Alliance Master-Teacher Pavilion wouldn't have ranked amidst the bottom all this while. Forget it, let's not talk about that. There were still 2 more months before the end of the tournament. Knowing that it was still too early to talk of all these, Alliance Master Zhao shook his head. Zhang Shi's extraordinary medical skill has saved my daughter's life. I would like to show my gratitude to you. If you have any request, as long as it's within my means, I'll surely try my best to fulfill it. Alliance Head, you're being too polite. However, I do have a request to ask of. Since the other party had already made an offer, Zhang Xian didn't stand on ceremony. Even though the other party was the powerful head of the alliance, Zhang Xian had undergone many things in his journey here. Such a situation was no longer sufficient to leave him tense. Alliance head Zhao turned his gaze to Zhang Xian. Actually, it's like that. I need a medicinal herb, but I'm not too sure where I can obtain it. I hope that the alliance head can help me look into the matter. Zhang Xian raised the issue of the soul-calming grass and sentiment-drowning flower. Soul-calming grass. I've never heard of it before. However, I do know of one sentiment-drowning flower of maturity 500 years and above. Furthermore, it's still alive. Alliance head Zhao hesitated for a moment before replying. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. Soul-calming grass and sentiment-drowning flower were both basic ingredient required for cultivating the soul-rouse grass. Just one stalk was enough. However, even though I know where it is, it won't be easy to get it. Alliance head Zhao shook his head. Oh. Zhang Shi, you'll understand once I finish my part of the story. The place where most medicinal herbs are gathered would be Herb Kings. Following which would be the Apothecary Guild and Physician Guild. I believe that as a master teacher, Zhang Shi should be well aware of this, Alliance head Zhao said. Zhang Xian nodded his head. Herb King actually just refers to merchants dealing with bulks of medicinal herbs. In terms of variety and quantity of herbs, there was no one who could beat them. After them would be the Apothecary Guild and Physician Guild, which used humongous quantity of medicinal herbs on a daily basis. Due to the nature of their occupations, these 3 parties usually had a huge reserve of medicinal herbs. Chapter 517, The Reckless Demon Sink Beast. However, the herbs from those 3 parties are mostly dried. They don't possess much herbs that are still alive, let alone a rare medicinal herb like the sentiment-drowning flower, Alliance head Zhao said. These 3 locations were where most medicinal herbs were concentrated at. As dried herbs shared the same medicinal property and they were easier to store, most of the herbs were dried before putting into storage. As such, there were basically no fresh medicinal herbs there. There are various sources to a Herb King's medicinal herbs. The most common source would be the herbologists, but rare herbs like the sentiment-drowning flower wouldn't appear in those fields. Besides, ordinary herbologists don't have the ability to nurture it. I do know of a herbologist who possesses such capability. That person has a herb garden in the west of the Myriad Kingdom city, and she has all kinds of bizarre herbs in her herb garden. Most of them are rare herbs that one could hardly see in the market. However, Alliance head Zhao smiled bitterly. The owner of the herb garden has an eccentric personality, and she's nearly completely unsympathetic. Her herbs aren't for sale, regardless of how high a price one offers. Back then, I've tried to purchase some unique herbs from her for Lianer's illness, but I was turned away. Aren't for sale. Zhang Xian was perplexed. What does she need so many medicinal herbs for then? Given the humongous quantity of medicinal herbs the other party had, she couldn't possibly consume all of it herself, and since that was the case, what was the point keeping them? Medicinal herbs were just like ordinary plants in the sense that they had a limited lifespan. Even though there were some herbs that could live for several centuries, most only had a lifespan of a few years. More importantly, planting herbs and maintaining the herb garden were extremely expensive. Spirit stones, unique fertilizer, and manpower. These three were essential for any herb garden. Refusing to sell any medicinal herbs meant that one was pumping money in without any income. No matter how rich one was, it was impossible to sustain in the long run. I have no idea either. There are many in Myriad Kingdom City who have been wondering about that, but no one knows the real answer. Alliance head Zhao shook his head. Then doesn't anyone think of stealing from her? Zhang Xian was perplexed. Given how the other party had the medicinal herbs that most needed, surely there should be some who were willing to take the risk. Of course, people try to, but all of them ended in failure. The owner of the herb garden, Shui Yao, reached Transcendent Mortal Dan Pinnacle 50 years ago. No one knows what level she has reached since then, and even I am unconfident of defeating her. Alliance head Zhao said. Given how the other party was a Transcendent Mortal Dan Pinnacle expert 50 years ago, even if she had been unable to make a breakthrough, she was probably ranked in the very top among the experts of Myriad Kingdom City. More importantly, the herb garden has an exceptionally powerful formation set up by Guild Master Zheng of Honghai City's Formation Master Guild. It is at least a 4-star pinnacle, and many of those who try to steal the herbs within end up being killed or confined before they could even reach the field soon. Everyone realized that it is impossible to succeed, so no one dared to try so anymore, Alliance head Zhao said. Refusing to sell the herbs and killing or confining those who dare to lay their hands on her herbs, this fellow was indeed a tough nut to crack. Is there anywhere else that could have these two medicinal herbs? There isn't. Other than this herb garden, I can't think of anywhere else that might this herb, except for dry ones. Dry ones are meaningless to me. Zhang Xian shook his head. Only living herbs could be used to cultivate the soul rouse grass. Once the herb was dried, how could it possibly harness soul energy to gain the effect of waking one's soul? Where is the herb garden you speak of located? I would like to take a look myself. Zhang Xian had to nurture a soul rouse grass by hook or by crook. This was the only way he could save Lu Chong. Since he even went to a place as dangerous as the Soul Oracle tomb for it, no matter how troublesome the owner of the herb garden was, he would just have to find a way to deal with her. Hearing that the other party wanted to give it a try, Alliance head Zhao hesitated for a moment. Alright then. I'll have Jin Songhai accompany you. This way, even if she lays a hand on you, you'll at least be able to withstand her assault for a moment. Alright. Zhang Xian nodded his head. He didn't know the location of the herb garden, so he needed someone to lead the way. Father, I would like to take a look as well. Zhao Feiwu hurriedly said. What are you going there for? Alliance head Zhao frowned. The owner of the herb garden doesn't listen to even your words. I want to see how formidable she is. Zhao Feiwu chuckled. Having followed behind Zhang Xian the past few days, she knew that the other party was a person who would never give up until he achieved his goal. Honestly, she was curious to see whether the difficult herb garden owner or the formidable Zhang Shi would emerge victorious in the clash. Seeing that her father was hesitating, Zhao Feiwu hurriedly added, Don't worry, Elder Jin is around. Besides, no matter how disrespectful that herb garden owner may be, she won't lay her hands on me. After hesitating for a moment, Alliance head Zhao said, Alright then. The two of you'd better be careful, especially Zhang Shi. If the other party refuses to sell the herb, by no means should you insist on the issue. If it really comes down to it, I'll make a trip myself and perhaps she might sell me this favor. Back then, he had sent a subordinate to request for the required medicinal herbs only to end up being rejected. After which, he had intended to go over himself, but just then, they managed to find some medicinal herbs from the Physician Guild in replacement. Thus, the matter was settled just like that. Zhang Shi was his daughter's savior, and on top of that, the other party's outstanding talent also made it likely that he would accomplish great things in the future. Thus, if things didn't go well, he didn't mind stepping forward to help. As the head of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, a transcendent mortal Dan pinnacle expert, no matter how eccentric the other party's temper was, she should still sell the herbs in consideration of his identity. After asking a few more questions, Zhang Xian bade Alliance head Zhao farewell and left with Zhao Feiwu and Jin Songhai. Riding on an aerial savage beast, they left for the west of the city. The Myriad Kingdom Alliance was exceptionally large, extending for nearly several hundred kilometers. If one were to walk on their feet, it would take several hours to reach the herb garden. This time, the trio didn't ride on Zhao Feiwu's mount but the demon sink beast. As a transcendent mortal Fordan pinnacle spirit beast, its movement was as swift as though a bolt of lightning. In just a few dozen minutes, the trio could spot a gigantic garden appearing before their eyes. The garden was several hundred mu large, and it was shrouded by a light mist. With just a single glance, one could tell that it was guarded by a huge formation. 1 mu equals 666. 6 square meters, let's alight here. Knowing that they weren't allowed to fly straight in, Zhang Xian nodded his head and the demon sink beast landed at an area not too far away from the main door. The doors to the garden were tightly shut, and there wasn't a single person to be seen at the door. It seemed like everyone knew that the herbs here weren't for sale, so they all lost their interest. Otherwise, given the huge demand for medicinal herbs, it was impossible for a huge herb garden like this to be completely devoid of customers. Jin Songhai stepped forward and just as he was about to knock on the door, Jia, the door opened and a maid stepped forward. Our herb garden doesn't sell any medicinal herb, please leave. It seemed like she was already used to people coming over in search of medicinal herbs. As soon as she saw Zhang Xian and group, she immediately tried to chase them away. Not expecting to be rejected right before he could say anything, Zhang Xian felt a little helpless. How could he hope to purchase any medicinal herb when he was denied entry at the front door? Just as Zhang Xian was about to say something to persuade the other party to give way, the galloping of the horses suddenly sounded. Then, a carriage stopped at a direction not too far away and a middle-aged man alighted. Garden owner Mu, please enter. Upon identifying the person, the maid immediately respectfully opened the gates to allow him entry. Didn't you say that you don't sell any medicinal herbs? Why is he able to enter then? Jin Songhai frowned. This was too stark a contrast. They were being turned away at the door while the other party was allowed to strut it. Was identity a criterion to entering the garden as well? I apologize, but he's a guest of our owner. He holds an invitation letter in his hand, the maid spoke apologetically. One can enter as long as they have an invitation letter? Zhang Xian asked doubtfully. Before the maid could reply, a cold and arrogant voice sounded. Of course. The one who spoke was a curvaceous lady who seemed to be in her 30s. She had a thick makeup on, and even before her appearance, a heavy scent of rouge was already lingering in the air. Garden owner Shui is conducting a banquet tonight and only other garden owners are allowed to enter. Don't think that just any lowly peasant can enter this area. If you wish to purchase medicinal herbs, you should just leave right now. We don't welcome you here. Tilting her face up high, the lady spoke arrogantly. Her gaze was filled with cold disdain. Banquet? Only garden owners are allowed to enter. If that's the case, you must be a garden owner as well. Zhao Feiwu said. Of course. I am the garden owner of Green Mist Garden, Luo Qingyan. With a proud look, the beautiful lady flicked her wrist and took out a letter. It was the invitation to the herb garden. Do you see it? This is the invitation letter. If you don't have it, leave right now. Don't cause any trouble. Staring coldly at Zhang Xian, the lady snickered, judging from your appearance, you aren't even 20 years old yet. At your age, I doubt that you can even differentiate among the various herbs. A high-class banquet like this is clearly out of your league, don't try to get ahead of yourself. Study hard and maybe in 50 years or so, you might just get the chance to come in, ha 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 ha. Chuckling beneath her hands, the lady straightened her back. Her voluptuous chests looked uncomfortable in her tight dress, and they threatened to break free from their restraints. 50 years? Zhang Xian shook his head. Turning to the maid guarding the door, he asked, can anyone with the invitation letter enter? That's right. The maid contemplated over the prior instruction from her superior and hurriedly nodded her head. That's good. Hearing the other party's affirmative reply, Zhang Xian turned to the curvaceous lady and scratched his head sheepishly. I wish to negotiate with you. Can you lend me your invitation letter? Lend you? Ha ha ha. As though hearing the most hilarious joke in the world, the curvaceous lady burst into laughter. Following which, she stared down at Zhang Xian with a look of disdain. Why should I lend it to you? Garden owner Shui gave this to me. Who do you think you are? You refuse? Zhang Xian glanced at the curvaceous lady. You'd better scram before I fly into a temper. Otherwise, I swear you will be carried out of here. Bellowing furiously, a powerful aura flowed out from her. Transcendent Mortal 3 Dan. You intend to kill me? Shaking his head, Zhang Xian glanced behind and instructed, Demon Sink, negotiate with her in my stead and see if you can borrow the invitation letter from her. Roar. Hearing the order, the Demon Sink beast roared deeply and flew over. What do you intend to do? Before she could react, a humongous shadow appeared before her and a giant backside came crushing down her head. Putong. Just like that, she was crushed into the earth. Only her limbs and brain were spared, and she spewed huge mouthfuls of blood. Ding! After sitting down on the other party, the Demon Sink beast grabbed the invitation letter from the other party's hands with its mouth and threw it to Zhang Xian. Jin Songhai and Zhao Feiwu staggered. Their eyes were about to pop out from their eyes. Wasn't it supposed to be a negotiation? Why did it suddenly turn out like that? Chapter 518, the depressed Zhang Xian to be crushed by that massive Demon Sink beast who weighed 10,000 kilograms. Just the thought of it was sufficient to leave the two trembling. Shaking their head, the duo glanced at the curvaceous lady who was on the verge of fainting in sympathy. Of all people you could offend, why did you have to offend this fellow? This Zhang Shi may seem to be a pushover, but in truth, he was a troublemaker who feared nothing in the world. Otherwise, he couldn't have possibly charged single-handedly into the Xianyuan kingdom and destroy its entire royal family. If one were to speak politely with him, he would reply with equal courtesy, but given how you lashed out at him as though a madman, it would be a wonder if he didn't teach you a lesson. You are already very lucky that he didn't make you acknowledge him as your teacher on the spot. He even dared to command a transcendent mortal 9 Dan expert to acknowledge him as teacher. As for you, piece of cake. While the duo was shocked by the sight before them, the lady crushed under the Demon Sink beast felt like she was on the verge of going insane. As a powerful, beautiful, and influential garden owner, countless people vied for her favor. She thought that this fellow was just trying to attract her attention or even flirt with her by asking her for the invitation letter, yet he actually sent his spirit beast after her, spurting large mouthfuls of blood. The curvaceous lady, Luo Qingyan, was frenzied. I want to kill you. Shrieking furiously, she was just about to gather her strength to push away the massive figure above her when she heard the displeased voice of the young man not too far away. Demon Sink, what's wrong with you? Didn't I tell you to negotiate with her to borrow the invitation letter from her? Which part of borrow don't you understand? Why are you acting on your own whim? Do you still have any respect left for me, your master? Roar. The Demon Sink beast was stunned. Its massive lantern-like eyes blinked in confusion. Even though it possessed intelligence on par with humans, it still wasn't too well versed with the language of the humans. Most probably, it mistook Zhang Xian's negotiate for snatch. Besides, this fellow was used to being arrogant. It had always snatched whatever he wanted. If it wasn't for that, the Myriad Kingdom Alliance wouldn't have sent so many experts after him. Even if it had truly interpreted Zhang Xian's negotiate correctly, how could it have the patience to do so? Alright, enough. Stop putting on an act. Since you've made a mistake, you should be punished. You shall remain on that spot for an hour. Without my order, you are not to move at all. That young man berated furiously. Pu Luo Qingyan's fresh blood spurted out. Her face was filled with tears. Are you punishing it or me? You could have gotten it to sit somewhere else, and yet, you ordered it to remain on the spot for an hour. By the time it's done with its punishment, I will have already died. While she was spurting blood, Zhao Feiwu stepped forward and said, we're here to buy medicinal herbs. It'll be best if we don't cause any unnecessary trouble. You're right. The young man nodded his head. Thus, he turned to the maid at the entrance and passed the invitation letter over. All right, here's my invitation letter. Can I enter now? The maid. Honestly speaking, she was on the verge of losing her mind as well. She had seen plenty of arrogant people, but the young man before her topped it all. The invitation letter showed a proof of the person's standing, identity, and the garden owner's courtesy. Snatching it like that, would any sane person do it that way? More importantly, even if you wished to do it, you could have done it discreetly where no one was around. If I didn't know about it, I could at least overlook the matter and allow you in. But to snatch it right before my eyes, do you really think that I'm blind? What was even more infuriating was that even after you're done, you still have the cheek to present the invitation letter to me and innocently ask if you can enter or not enter your head. Infuriated, her chest puffed up and she was ready to explode at any time. No way. How dare you snatch an invitation letter right before my eyes? Unless you kill me, don't even dream of entering. Clenching her pearly teeth tightly together, the maid drove her Jinqi, seemingly prepared to prevent Zhang Xian from entering even if it would cost her life. No way. The herb garden's dignity mustn't be sullied. Just as she was about to make a move, the young man hesitated for a moment before asking, Lady, are you ill? The maid staggered. You sure are scum. I didn't allow you to enter and you immediately say that I'm ill. You're the one who is ill, your entire family is ill. She had never felt so angry before. If she could, she would immediately charge forward to beat that fellow to death. Flicking her wrist, a weapon appeared in her hand. Just as she was about to make a move, the young man's voice sounded once more. I see that the yang-bai acupoint on your glabella is slightly red, and the Jinqi flow in the left of your body is a little stifled. If I'm not mistaken, do you suffer from severe headaches every night, and it will feel as though the back of your head is convulsing? The furious maid suddenly froze. The other party was correct. She did suffer from splitting headaches every night, and it was as if the back of her head was convulsing violently. She had visited the physician guild to have it checked, but the results were inconclusive. As such, she could only bear with it. How in the world did this fellow know about it? Not only so, Jinqi doesn't flow through the meridian of your right thigh smoothly, resulting in your strength being imbalanced. As such, your cultivation has reached a bottleneck, and you find yourself being unable to take the final step forward. If I'm not mistaken, you are secretly cultivating an isotribute cultivation technique. Am I right? The other party's voice continued. How did you know? The maid was taken aback. She had found her cultivation coming to a standstill recently. In order to boost her cultivation, she chose to cultivate an isotribute cultivation technique. However, she kept this matter a secret and even her bosom buddies were kept in the dark. How did this fellow learn of it? It doesn't matter how I know it. You were once injured by the attack of a person who cultivates a yang attribute cultivation technique, causing a surge of yang energy to clog up your meridians. Your original intention is to cultivate an isotribute cultivation technique to neutralize the yang energy so that you can regain your cultivation talent. The young man before her shook his head. Your idea isn't bad, but the method you used couldn't be any more wrong. The maid trembled in shock. Her eyes were so huge that they were about to fall to the floors. Her mouth was agape, but not a single word could express her emotions at the moment. She had indeed fought with a person of yang attribute a year ago, and due to an injury from that battle, her cultivation came to a standstill. As such, she lost the right to cultivate medicinal herbs and was reduced to becoming a doorman. With his hands behind his back, the young man calmly explained, yin and yang do neutralize one another. However, the surge of yang energy in your body has already fused with your blood and meridian. Cultivating an ice attribute cultivation technique all of the sudden will only turn your body into a battlefield. Of course, with every battle, the yang attribute Jinqi would slowly diminish with each battle. However, the ice attribute Jinqi would also be scattered throughout your body during the collision, and some of them would flow along with your bloodstream into your head, thus inducing that sharp splitting headache of yours. The maid's lips quivered. Is there any cure for it? The other party's analysis was logical. She had thought that the headache was caused by her fatigue, and never in her dream did she expect that it would be a product from her cultivating an ice attribute cultivation technique. Thinking about it, the headache did indeed start from the moment she started cultivating this cultivation technique. Not only did the other party notice her symptoms, he even found out the cause of the illness, something that even the physicians of the Physician Guild were unable to. To be able to do so much with a single glance, who in the world was this person? The treatment method is simple. You just have to practice the fallen flower swordsmanship 5 times every day while driving your Jinqi. Within 10 days, you'll make a complete recovery. Zhang Xian said. How did you know that I have learned the fallen flower swordsmanship? The maid's body swayed once more. The fallen flower swordsmanship was imparted to her by garden owner Shui, and among her sisters, she was the only one who'd managed to master it. How did the other party manage to discern so much when all she had done was take out her sword? Was she dreaming? Crushing garden owner Qing Yan to the floor, leaving her spewing large mouthfuls of blood on the ground, to steal her invitation letter, seeing through her illness with a single glance and offering a solution to it on top of that. Was this fellow spouting nonsense, or was he serious? Ignoring the other party's question, the young man continued with an impassive expression. The fallen flower swordsmanship allows one to create sword chi reminiscent of a fallen flower. If you were to drive your Jinqi while executing this technique, you can drive the yang energy clogged within your body out along with the sword chi. If you were to do it 5 times a day over a course of 10 days, the yang energy should completely dissipate, and there should be no after effect even if you were to continue cultivating the ice attribute cultivation technique. Hearing that the treatment method was that simple, the maid hesitated for a moment before gritting her teeth. Lifting the sword in her hand, she began doing as the other party instructed. The fallen flower swordsmanship created Jinqi reminiscent of fallen flowers. In an instant, a paradise filled with fallen petals seemed to have appeared before everyone's eyes. However, each of these petals carried an extraordinarily sharp and cold aura, creating a sight of desolate beauty. Zhang Xian couldn't help but feel awed as he watched the swordsmanship. As expected of the Myriad Kingdom city, even a maid guarding the entrance was at half transcension. Soon, the maid finished the entire sword routine. Sensing the changes in her body, she widened her eyes in astonishment and delight. It was just the first time, but her body already felt much more comfortable. The yang energy which she'd thought she would never be able to rid of had indeed dissipated by a little. Even though there was still a significant amount of it left in her meridian, at the very least this meant that what the other party had said was true. Her affliction could really be treated by this method. Thank you for your guidance. Sheathing her sword, the maid clasped her fists politely. At this moment, her anger had already vanished completely. To be able to see through the problem in her cultivation and allocate a treatment method to it, the other party's means were even more incredible than the physicians of the Physician Guild. Without a doubt, the person before her was anything but simple. A person of his caliber couldn't possibly come here just to cause trouble. Zhang Xian waved his hands nonchalantly. The other party's problem wasn't too complicated, so it didn't take too much trouble. Chuckling softly, he spoke with a refined tone, "May I enter now?" This "may I know who Gongzi is," the maid couldn't help but ask. Even though she knew that the other party was a formidable figure, she still had to inquire on his identity first. Otherwise, she couldn't account for his entry to the garden owner. "This is Zhang Shi." Jin Songhai stepped forward and replied. "Zhang Shi? You're a master teacher?" The maid was taken aback. Zhang Xian was perplexed. Even if I am a master teacher, surely you need not be so surprised. After all, there is a huge bunch of master teachers in Myriad Kingdom City. If only I knew that you are a master teacher, I won't have blocked your path. For the banquet tonight, the garden owner has declared that on top of the other garden owners, all master teachers are allowed to enter the premises of the herb garden freely, the maid said. Master teachers can enter freely? Zhang Xian's body swayed and his vision went dark. What in the world was this? If only he knew that it was that simple, he wouldn't have gotten the demon sink beast to make a move. Just to enter this herb garden, he went through so much trouble only to realize that his efforts were meaningless. Zhang Shi, this way please. After confirming the other party's identity, the maid immediately gestured the young man in. Suppressing his frustration, Zhang Xian proceeded into the garden along with Zhao Feiwu and Jin Songhai. However, barely after taking 2 steps, he saw the maid pointing to Luo Qingyan, who was still crushed under the demon sink beast. Zhang Shi, what about garden owner Qingyan? Oh. Go and rest by the side first, I'll call you later on. Knowing the other party's intention, Zhang Xian waved the demon sink beast away. Even though it was an accident that the demon sink beast had misunderstood his intentions, that lady had it coming. Since she dared to disrespect a master teacher, she should have been ready to be punished. Roar! Hearing the command, the demon sink beast nodded. Shaking its giant backside, it spread its wings and soared into the sky. Damn it! Damn it! With her squashed body, Luo Qingyan stared hatefully at the departing backs of Zhang Xian and the others. Her body trembled and she gritted her teeth in resentment. As the garden owner of Green Mist Herb Garden, her standing was on par with the nobility of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. When had she suffered such injustice? To be sat on by a spirit beast, this was an insult. Even if the other party was a master teacher, she refused to simply let this matter go. Garden owner Qingyan, what's wrong? Just as she swore to exact vengeance on that hateful young man, a surprised voice suddenly sounded. Following which, a young man donning a master teacher emblem with 4 shining stars on top walked over. Chapter 519, Herbologist clans that young man was actually a 4-star master teacher. Luo Qingyan pays respect to Song Shi. Upon seeing the young man, Luo Qingyan hurriedly clasped her fist respectfully. If Zhang Xian was here, he would surely recognize the other party as the man who'd bought the soulless metal humanoid from him in Honghai City. Garden owner Qingyan, seeing the beautiful and proud garden owner covered with mud from head to toe, Song Chao muttered doubtfully. After receiving the soulless metal humanoid, he immediately returned back to the Myriad Kingdom City. Recalling the guidance of Zhang Shi, he immediately visited all the herb gardens to buy the necessary herbs. It was because of this that he'd met this garden owner several times. The other party's beauty had bewitched him, leaving him burning in desire. Upon seeing the other party in such an unkempt state, he couldn't help but feel puzzled. Song Shi, I beseech you to save me. Luo Qingyan's eyes shone as she recalled something. She immediately put on a tearful face that seemed as though she was going to kowtow to the other party at any moment just so that he would stand up for her. Save you? What's wrong? Raising his hand to stop the other party, Song Chao asked doubtfully. Someone tried to barge into the herb garden earlier, and knowing that garden owner Shua disliked strangers disturbing her, I stopped him. Who knew that the other party would actually send his tamed beast after me? At this moment, Luo Qingyan seemed nothing more than a pitiful weak lady. Song Shi, I really didn't know that he's a master teacher. If only I knew earlier, I surely wouldn't have stopped him. Just because you stopped him, the other party sent his tamed beast after you? Song Chao frowned. Actually, it's not that master teacher's fault. Even though he isn't wearing a master teacher robe and he didn't indicate his identity, I should have been asked him about it beforehand. Song Shi, I won't do it again. Save me, Luo Qingyan cried. Even though she seemed to be regretful of her actions, she was actually playing down her disrespect and emphasizing on the other party's domineering nature instead. This way, she made it seem as though Zhang Xian was the one who was unreasonable. Not only did he not flash his identity, he even injured a person who was just acting within her scope of responsibility. Atrocious. How dare a master teacher act in such a manner? This cannot be overlooked. As expected, after hearing Luo Qingyan's distorted version of the story, Song Chao's face darkened. Master teachers were a representation of the master teacher pavilion. As such, wherever they went, they had to make sure to act in a manner appropriate for their identity. How could the other party act so domineeringly as though he was a hoodlum? Don't worry. The blame is not on you for this matter. When I see that fellow later on, I'll make sure to teach him a lesson. I'll drill the idea of respect into him and have him apologize to you. Song Chao waved his hands grandly. How could a master teacher beat someone who was just doing her responsibility? This was something that only a tyrant would do. Thank you, Song Shi. Seeing that the other party was going to stand up for her, Luo Qingyan's eyes glowed in excitement. She turned to look at the young man in admiration. Did you see that? This is the might of a 4-star master teacher. Only a person of his level would dare to teach other master teachers a lesson. Humph, you sure acted arrogantly back then, having your tamed beast to sit on me. Let's see how you fare before Song Shi. In her view, given how the other party wasn't even 20 yet and his cultivation was clearly beneath hers, even if he was a master teacher, he would be at most 3-star only. Before a 4-star master teacher, he would still have to bend his back and act obediently. Song Shi, I'll take you to him now. The more she thought about it, the more excited she felt. That I'm not too sure as well. It's not like you are unaware of garden owner Shue's eccentric temper. She must have her own reasons for doing so, that's true. Amidst the crowd, the lowered voice of a trio sounded. Centerpiece? Could that be? Zhao Feiwu's eyebrows suddenly shot up. You know about it? Seeing that the other party seemed to have thought of something, Zhang Xian immediately turned his gaze to her. I've once read a book concerning herb gardens, so I know a thing or two about it. Zhao Feiwu nodded her head. Suppressing her voice, she continued, they should be referring to the earth vein spirit vine. Earth vein spirit vine? Zhang Xian asked doubtfully. Even though he had read a considerable number of books, he had never come into contact with information regarding herb gardens. As such, he found the name extremely foreign. Zhao Wufei nodded her head. It's not really a secret. All herb gardens would have this. The earth vein spirit vine is a unique that grows by aligning itself with earth veins, absorbing spiritual energy, minerals, and water from it. Then, it uses all of these to nourish the ground, thus creating a superior field suited for growing all kinds of medicinal herbs. If one were to release their cattle at the same location, no matter how lush and concentrated the grass was, it was just a matter of time before it all disappeared. Medicinal herbs were the same as well. It was still fine to grow a medicinal herb in one location, but if one were to try to grow multiple medicinal herbs on the same field, the herbs would start competing for nutrients and this would sap the field dry swiftly. Without nutrients to sustain the medicinal herbs, no matter how formidable the herb was, it would wither swiftly. The reason why herb gardens could supply a steady source of medicinal herbs without fail was due to the existence of this thing. Its decline and death meant that the entire herb garden was doomed. All of the medicinal herbs in the field would be ruined. Medicinal herbs growing on a field nourished by the earth vein spirit vine have a much more beautiful tone and significantly larger size. More importantly, its rate of maturity would be much faster as well. Some of the legendary 500-year-old herbs could reach maturity here in just 200 years. Otherwise, who could live for 500 years just to grow a single medicinal herb? Zhao Feiwu said. I see. Zhang Xian nodded his head. He had been puzzled by how medicinal herbs could be grown in large groups without any adverse effect. After all, unlike normal grains, they required a huge quantity of spiritual energy and nutrients. No matter how fertile the ground was, it was very difficult to sustain such massive output. It turned out that it was due to the credit of this mystical plant. If they are really talking about the earth vein spirit vine, then it's no wonder why garden owner Shui is panicking. Without the earth vein spirit vine to condition the field, given how the medicinal herbs were grown in proximity to one another, they would all surely shrivel swiftly, Zhao Feiwu continued. The earth vein spirit vine was like a formation providing the required conditions for the spirit herb's survival. Once it died, their source of nutrition would be stopped and they would shrivel swiftly. Zhang Xian nodded. Just as he was about to speak, a friendly voice suddenly sounded not too far away. Brother, did you follow your elders here to participate in the banquet as well? The one speaking was an amiable-looking young man. 2 dimples would appear on his face when he smiled, and this seemed to make him more approachable. Elder? Zhang Xian was taken aback. That's right. The only ones who are privileged to receive the invitation letters are the garden owners, herb kings, and the herbologist clans. I have met the 8 herb owners and 7 herb kings of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, and you clearly aren't any of them. Naturally, you must be here with your elder. The young man grinned. Herbologist clans? Zhang Xian was perplexed. He knew of garden owners and herb kings, but what in the world were herbologist clans? You don't know of herbologist clans? Seeing the other party's perplexed expression, the young man widened his eyes in disbelief. This was part of the fundamental knowledge of herb gardens. To not even know this, how in the world did the other party manage to get in here? The cultivation of medicinal herbs require the care of specialists, and herbologist clans like us provide such manpower to the herb gardens, the young man explained. There were farmers to care for the fields and shepherds to care for the herds. Similarly, there were herbologists to care for medicinal herbs. The higher tier a medicinal herb was, the harder it was to cultivate it. Similar to pill forging, it was an extremely profound knowledge. To cultivate a formidable herb, not only would one require time, more importantly, one would also require skilled and experienced workers. The medicinal herb being unable to live up to its full potential was one thing. In the worst-case scenario, an error made could even cause the plant to wither and die. Using the spirit herb, noble grass, as example, this herb needed to be watered by maidens to live. If the maiden were to get into a relationship with a male, as soon as a drop of water from her were to fall onto the spirit herb, the herb would immediately dissipate into a cloud of smoke. It was exactly due to this nature of noble grass that it was used to check whether a lady was still a maiden or not. Melody rapture grass, it would take on an appearance similar to a human's eye once it flowers. To keep it alive, a person had to dance and sing to delight it with a melody. Otherwise, it would die very quickly. There were many of such bizarre medicinal herbs throughout the world, and without the required knowledge, it would be impossible to grow them. And this knowledge was passed down only within the herbologist clans who devoted their entire lives to raising herbs. Back then, when the master-teacher pavilion was organizing the occupations, herbologists had been raised in the discussion. However, this occupation had a very divided heritage and there wasn't any clear school. On top of that, it had very little to do with cultivation and skills, being a knowledge-oriented occupation. As such, it failed to be ranked within the 9 paths. Otherwise, its name would surely be listed amidst the occupations of the lower 9 paths. Chapter 520, Impossible to Guard Against. I am just taking a look around, I didn't come with anyone. Understanding what was going on, Zhang Xian shook his head. Just taking a look around? The young man was taken aback. Where were they? The herb garden of garden owner Shui. Even an envoy of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance would find it hard to come in here. To be casually taking a look around here, you must be jesting. He had seen the fellow come in earlier, the maid guarding the entrance had escorted him personally here, and her attitude was exceptionally respectful. Even his grandfather didn't enjoy such a privilege. This was precisely the reason why he stepped forward in the hope of making friends. Otherwise, as the successor to a herbologist clan, he didn't have the time to be chatting everyone up. Thinking that the other party was just trying to keep a low profile, he decided not to ask any further. Smiling, he introduced himself. I am Lu Zhan, a member of Myriad Kingdom City's Lu clan. Zhang Xian. Zhang Xian replied. So, it's Brother Zhang, nice to meet you. Despite reporting the Lu clan's name, the other party's expression remained unchanged. Lu Zhan's complexion immediately turned grave, and he hurriedly clasped his fist respectfully. As one of the 4 great clans of the Myriad Kingdom City, the Lu clan's power and standing was known throughout the entire alliance. Even nobles and powerful officials would have to respectfully address him as Lu Gongzi upon hearing of his identity. Yet, this fellow remained unmoved. It seemed like he must have a huge backing. Thinking so, his attitude became even more respectful. If he were to know that Zhang Xian had simply never heard of the Lu clan, it was hard to say whether he would puke blood or faint on the spot. After chatting a moment longer, Lu Zhan realized that the person before him truly knew nothing about medicinal herbs at all, and his confusion deepened. Other people were still guessing the reason behind garden owner Shue's invitation, but as the successor to a prestigious herbologist clan, he had already received concrete news about the matter. After all, many of the herbologist maids serving in this herb garden came from their clan. It wasn't a problem for them to gather some information. Just as everyone had guessed, a problem had cropped up with the earth vein spirit vine. This was precisely the reason why all those who were invited were the greatest minds in the topic of herbology. Yet, this fellow actually knew nothing at all. He had never even heard of herbologist clans. What exactly was his true identity for garden owner Shui to invite him over? While they were chatting, Luo Qingyan and Song Chao arrived at the hall. Song Shi, that's the fellow who laid his hands on me. Scanning the crowd, Luo Qingyan soon saw that hateful fellow and pointed him out. Following the other party's finger, Song Chao soon saw a figure. Zhang Xian was currently speaking to Lu Zhan, and his back was against them. Thus, Song Chao only saw the other party's back view. Even though it seemed weirdly familiar to him, he didn't connect it to Zhang Xian. After all, Zhang Shi seemed extremely close to Hall Master Sai of Honghai City back then, and so, Song Chao thought that the other party was from Honghai City. Why would someone from Honghai City suddenly appear here, and not to mention, how much of a coincidence would it be for the two of them to appear in the same herb garden? There's no mistake, it is him. He is the one who abused his identity as a master teacher to attack me. Song Shi, please redress my grievance. As long as you teach him a lesson in my stead, I, Qingyan, shall be yours. Luo Qingyan cuddled up with Song Chao with her voluptuous chests. She knew what men liked, and using her charms, she had always been able to convince them to help her. Otherwise, how could a young lady like her possibly open up a herb garden in Myriad Kingdom City? Feeling the astonishing buoyancy pressing against his arm, Song Chao immediately nodded his head and declared righteously, "Don't worry, even if you didn't say a thing, I wouldn't allow a person who sullied the name of master teachers to get away scot-free." Even though he knew that the other party was just making use of him for vengeance, he didn't feel put off by it. In the first place, it was his duty to safeguard the honor and prestige of the Master Teacher Pavilion, not to mention, such a beautiful lady was asking for his help. Following behind that curvaceous figure, they soon arrived before Zhang Xian and group. We meet once again. Knowing that the 4-star Song Shi would get back at Zhang Xian for her, Luo Qingyan was fearless. Stepping forward, she sneered coldly. Zhang Xian turned around and froze for a moment. Blinking his eyes, he asked doubtfully, "I thought you don't have an invitation letter. How did you enter the venue?" Hearing those words, Luo Qingyan nearly spurted a mouthful of blood. "You still have the cheek to ask if I have an invitation letter or not. You're the one who snatched it away from me, okay?" I've entered by tagging along with Song Shi. Suppressing her rage, Luo Qingyan turned to Song Shi and said, "It's this Zhang Shi who abandoned his honor as a master teacher and ordered his tamed beast to attack me. I beseech Song Shi to redress my grievance." However, Song Shi remained completely motionless. Luo Qingyan frowned. Just as she was about to further provoke him into action, Zhang Shi's voice sounded, "Song Shi." "Oh. It's Little Song." Little Song. Luo Qingyan was stunned for a moment before frenzied joy gushed through her heart. This was a genius 4-star master teacher, an expert that came from a neighboring sect. Even the elders of Myriad Kingdom Alliance Master Teacher Pavilion would have to regard him as their peer, and yet, a young brat like you dares to address him as Little Song. Luo Qingyan had been thinking of how she should further fan the flames between the two young men, but from the looks of it now, there was no need for it. The other party had simply courted his own death. Not only her, even Lu Zhan, who had been trying to fathom Zhang Xian's identity, nearly keeled over. There were 4 stars on the emblem pinned on the chest of this Song Shi, 4-star master teacher. To address the other party as Little Song as though he was a junior, Lu Zhan hurriedly turned over to Song Shi in hopes of mediating the situation when the face of the genius suddenly distorted, and he looked as though he was going to cry at any moment now. Rookie Song Chao pays respect to Zhang Shi. At this moment, he could feel his heart crumbling. Even if the other party was a 4-star master teacher, he would have challenged the other party on his actions. But before this fellow, how could he dare to do so? Having been beguiled by the other party's impartation of heaven's will twice consecutively, his fortune had already run dry. Having experienced the other party's astonishing means personally in the past, if not in consideration for his pride and honor, he would have already run away straight upon seeing Zhang Xian's face. Teach him a lesson. Even if someone were to give him 10 guts, he wouldn't dare to do it. Song Shi, he's being disrespectful to you. Why are huh? Luo Qingyan was still immersed in the vision of Zhang Xian being pummeled violently by Song Shi, and she was just about to introduce some punishment methods to the latter when she suddenly realized what Song Shi said and froze. What did rookie mean? It reflected one's ineptitude. Usually, only when juniors met with someone superior to them would they use such an address. This genius, a 4-star master teacher, was actually using this address with Zhang Shi. Could it be that this Zhang Shi, despite his young age, was even more incredible than Song Shi? Are you for real? Luo Qingyan was about to burst into tears. She thought that a huge figure like Song Shi would surely be able to teach that arrogant fellow a lesson so that she could get back at him. Who knew that the other party's backing was even bigger? Despite coming here to return the humiliation, she found herself being humiliated instead. What in the world was this? Lu Zhan's mouth also widened in shock. His eyes grew even bigger than that of a goldfish. He had been trying to guess this person's identity all along, and he had even thought of the Alliance head residence. But one thing he never imagined was that the other party would be a master teacher, not to mention, a master teacher who could make a 4-star master teacher address himself as a rookie willingly. This was too fearsome. It was no wonder why a maid escorted him personally. He did possess the qualification for such treatment. Ignoring the shocked duo, Zhang Xian turned to Song Chao and asked, "Little Song, you wish to redress her grievance?" Initially, when he saw this fellow, he was a little surprised. However, he soon realized why the other party was here as well. In the treatment formula that he gave the other party, there were some medicinal herbs that needed to be fresh, and the only place to procure them was at the herb gardens. Most probably, he was here for that purpose. And no, I just happened to meet with her. I don't know her at all. Song Chao smiled awkwardly. Having fallen under the other party's impartation of heaven's will twice, he knew that the other party was a master teacher who was far superior to him. Before such a figure, how could he possibly dare pull his weight? You don't know her? Zhang Xian lifted his finger and pointed. Only then did Song Chao realize that Luo Qingyan's voluptuous chest was still pressing against his arm. I really don't know her at all. Shocked, Song Chao hurriedly jerked his arm and pushed the ladder away. The comfortable buoyant sensation from before felt like needle pricks at this instant, pricking him to the point that tears were threatening to spill from his eyes. Song Shi, being pushed away, Luo Qingyan finally realized that the formidable Song Shi wasn't just respectful toward Zhang Shi. Rather, he was fearful of the other party. A person capable of inducing fear in a 4-star master teacher. What exactly was the other party's identity? Terrified, Luo Qingyan slowly backed away. At this instant, vengeance was the last thing in her mind. All that she could think of was how she could get away. She really felt like slapping the previous her at this moment. Why in the world was the latter so blind as to provoke a person of such standing? It was already a huge blessing that she was still breathing at the moment. Alright, I get it. There's no need for you to act like that. Ignoring Luo Qingyan, who was preparing to escape, Zhang Xian waved his hands nonchalantly. Then, something suddenly struck him and his eyes lit up. Turning to Song Chao, he said, "Right, do you need more soulless metal humanoids?" Previously, at the Soul Oracle Tomb, Sun Chang had taken 4 grade 7 metal coffins, and of which, one of them was empty and the remaining 3 were filled with soulless metal humanoids. In any case, since those things were meaningless to him and a wealthy potential buyer was before him, he decided to try his luck. Soulless metal humanoid Zhang Shi still has more of them? Song Chao asked. I still have 3 more. On top of that, I have the coffins which they are stored in as well. If you're interested, I can sell the coffin together with it and give you a discount. 5 middle-tier spirit stones for 1 set. Zhang Xian said. Previously, he'd sold the soulless metal humanoid to the other party for 40,000 low-tier spirit stones. This time, the coffin was thrown into the mix as well, but the price was only 5 middle-tier spirit stones. There was indeed a significant discount in the price. 5 middle-tier spirit stones. Song Chao's lips twitched. I don't have that many middle-tier spirit stones. His entire fortune had run dry from purchasing the soulless metal humanoid from before. Even though he had recouped his losses by reporting the expense to the elders of his sect after returning to the Myriad Kingdom City, that was all in terms of low-tier spirit stones. Even if he were to strip himself bare, he could only produce 1 middle-tier spirit stone. Furthermore, that was a reward for obtaining the soulless metal humanoid. Then, how much do you have? Zhang Xian asked. 1, Song Chao replied honestly. That works as well. I'll sell you 1 grade 7 metal coffin then. This is a work from a 4-star blacksmith. It can serve as a comfortable bed which will cool you down in summer and warm you up in winter. More importantly, it's a set with the soulless metal humanoid you bought previously. If you were to return with it and study it thoroughly, you might be able to make a breakthrough in your soul cultivation. Zhang Xian flicked his wrist and passed a storage ring over. Storage rings were already worthless to him now, and he had several of them on him. In this storage ring was the coffin storing the soulless metal humanoid which Luo Zhu stole previously. Zhang Xian had already gained a deep understanding of soul oracles via Mo Huncheng, and so, these coffins and soulless metal humanoids served little purpose to him. It would be best if he could trade them for something more practical. Grade 7 metal coffin. Grabbing the ring, Song Chao immediately dripped a droplet of blood on it before sending his consciousness into it. After taking a look, his eyes immediately lit up. There were indeed many symbols commonly used by soul oracles carved on it. If one were to study the soulless metal humanoid alongside the coffin, it could indeed help to augment one's understanding towards souls. Alright, I'll take it. Here's your middle-tier spirit stone. As he said so, he flicked his wrist and passed a jade box over. Opening a crack in the jade box, Zhang Xian immediately felt concentrated spiritual energy gushing straight toward him. Knowing that there was a middle-tier spirit stone inside, Zhang Xian nodded his head in satisfaction and put it in his ring. I have another 3 soulless metal humanoid and the higher-grade crimson metal coffin. If you're interested in them, bring more middle-tier spirit stones along with you to look for me. I'll welcome you anytime. After receiving the middle-tier spirit stone, the satisfied Zhang Xian looked at Song Chao as though he was a mobile sack of money. This fellow was indeed wealthy. Zhang Xian had profited significantly from the other party. As expected of a sect member. Yes. I'll definitely report the matter to my sect. If there's anything we need, we'll definitely look for you. Nodding his head, Song Chao turned around and left. However, right after taking a few steps, he suddenly froze and his complexion darkened. Tears began streaming down his face. Shit, I got beguiled again. Despite being on his guard, he still fell for the other party's tricks. He was truly a foe that was impossible to guard against. Chapter 521, Herb Field. Back then, with a soul depth of 12. 1. Zhang Xian was able to persuade the other party easily. Now that his soul depth had reached 14. 1 and he had undergone a second celestial master teacher acknowledgement, it was no longer an issue for him to do so much. Even so, Song Chao actually didn't make a loss. A grade 7 metal coffin was an artifact that a 4-star blacksmith specially crafted for housing a soulless metal humanoid. It probably was even more expensive than this when Imo Huncheng bought it back then. Depressed, Song Chao was just about to look for Zhang Shi to take back his spirit stone when the room suddenly hushed. A slight air of vitality wafted in the hall. Garden owner Shui arrives. Along with the declaration, an elder who looked like she was in her 50s walked into the room. Even though her skin was a little loose and there were signs of age all around her, one could still see hints of a previous beauty in her. She didn't reveal her cultivation, but vaguely, one could feel a powerful aura from her that seemed to nearly match up to the demon sink beast. It was no wonder why Alliance head Zhao was slightly apprehensive of the other party's strength. From the looks of it, his worry was not unfounded. I thank everyone here for attending today's banquet. Walking into the hall, garden owner Shui addressed with a smile. Garden owner Shui, you're being much too polite. How could I dare miss out on a banquet hosted by garden owner Shui? We haven't met one another for such a long time anyway. This banquet serves as a platform for us to catch up, the crowd smiled. Even though this herb garden wasn't open to the public, everyone knew about the formidable variety and quality of herbs within this garden. Without a doubt, among the 8 great herb gardens, this one ranked at the very top. The same went for garden owner Shui's cultivation as well. Even though those were just pleasantries, it also reflected their true thoughts. I apologize for calling all of you over so abruptly. Even though I've used the front of a banquet to gather all of you here today, I believe most of you have already guessed my true intentions. Even if I don't say anything, everyone here should know the importance of an earth vein spirit vein to a herb garden. The abrupt changes of the herb garden have caught me off guard, and due to my limited ability, I am unable to find a solution to the problem for the time being. Thus, I gathered everyone here together in hope of borrowing everyone's knowledge to tide me through this crisis. As long as anyone can come up with a solution to the problem, Shui Yao, hereby swear that they shall be an eternal friend of mine. No matter what medicinal herbs they require in the future, my herb garden shall supply it to them for free. Supply medicinal herbs for free. Isn't this gift a little, no, way too generous? Garden owner Shui's medicinal herbs have never been put up for sale before, and as such, there are quite a lot of herbs with the maturity of a century or higher. That's not important. More importantly, if you were to become garden owner Shui's friend, given her strength and identity, who would dare trifle with you? That's true. A huge commotion immediately broke out below. Everyone's eyes went red in agitation. Even Lu Zhan's breathing hastened, and his eyes went red in agitation. Even though the Lu clan was noted as one of the 4 great clans of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, it ranked at the very bottom of the 4. It was at risk of being pulled down by the competitors below them. If they could pull garden owner Shui to their side, it would just be a matter of time before they climbed to the very top. Suppressing his excitement, he glanced at the young man he had just met and his admiration for the latter immediately deepened. Everyone's faces were reddened in excitement and many elders in the room even had veins popping at their temples. Yet, this young man was able to retain his composure despite the massive benefits involved. Perplexed, Lu Zhan asked, "Brother Zhang, aren't you excited? What is there to be excited about?" Zhang Xian asked in confusion. Being garden owner Shue's friend, halfway through his words, Lu Zhan suddenly smiled bitterly. The person before him was a figure who could even command respect from a 4-star master teacher and have the latter identify himself as a rookie. Shui Yao might be a formidable figure in the Myriad Kingdom city, but she might still be insufficient to catch the eye of the latter. Interrupting everyone's excitement, garden owner Shui said, "I've already said all that should be said. Those who are interested should follow me to the herb field. We can discuss the solution to the matter after you all see the condition of the earth vein spirit vine for yourself." "Alright, we'll be troubling garden owner Shui to lead the way then. Let's see who can solve the problem." Everyone replied as they followed garden owner Shui out. The herb field in the herb garden was a top-notch field nourished by the earth vein spirit vine. All medicinal herbs that grew here were much more potent and larger than those growing anywhere else. Zhang Xian followed behind the crowd. Even before seeing the earth vein spirit vine, Zhang Xian could already feel the spiritual energy in the air growing more and more concentrated. Vitality seemed to flow in the air itself. Here, not only were medicinal herbs nourished, even cultivators would feel revitalized. Activating the eye of insight, Zhang Xian scanned the surroundings and he couldn't help but frown. Even though the herb field seemed to be filled with vitality, vaguely, a heavy aura of death seemed to linger in the area. It was a cold and sinister sensation. If one didn't pay careful attention, it would be easy to overlook it. It seems like something has indeed gone wrong with this earth vein spirit vine. Upon seeing this, Zhang Xian suddenly understood why garden owner Shui would gather so many herbologists here and offer such a huge reward. From the looks of it, the problem surrounding the earth vein spirit vine was much greater than expected. Before even reaching the herb field, Zhang Xian could already sense an aura of death. Wouldn't it be even more apparent when he stands before it? Judging from the concentration of the aura of death, if the earth vein spirit vine wasn't treated, it probably wouldn't last past a year. So many medicinal herbs, incredible. Our clan seems nothing in comparison to this. It is no wonder why everyone says that garden owner Shue's herb garden is the best across the entire Myriad Kingdom alliance. I was harboring some doubts beforehand, but after seeing this, I have no choice but to admit it. Garden owner Shui hasn't sold any medicinal herbs for more than 50 years now. The herbs she has in her storage must be incredible. Amidst shocked exclaims, the crowd arrived at the herb field. The herb field was several hundred mu large, and it was impossible to see the end with a single glance. All kinds of medicinal herbs were planted in the area, and every single one of them was exuding concentrated spiritual energy. Walking through this area, everyone felt an indescribable feeling of comfort. This is the spirit earth grass, reticent flower, wild gold, silver grass. These are all extremely expensive herbs, and on top of that, there is an extremely limited supply of them outside. For there to be so many of them in here, Lu Zhan was so shocked that his mouth could hardly close properly. The variety of medicinal herbs here was incredible. Many rare herbs that could rarely be seen outside filled the fields, and they came in different shapes and sizes, creating a very unique aesthetics to the area. Everyone, this is the centerpiece to my herb garden, the earth vein spirit vine. Walking along a narrow pathway in between the herb field, garden owner Shui pointed forward. Following his finger, everyone saw a massive vine rising up in the center of the herb field. Its trunk was 7 to 8 meters thick, and branches filled with lush leaves extended from it. It was the first time that most of the people here were seeing such a massive vine, and they couldn't help but be astounded by its hulking size. Even so, they swiftly noticed that something was amiss. The leaves on the thick vine were slightly yellowish, and they looked as though they were about to wither to death at any moment. This vine seems to be on the verge of death. How did this happen? How could such a huge vine wither? That's weird. Everyone here was a herbologist who had a deep understanding of medicinal herbs. They couldn't help but be astounded upon seeing such a massive vein being on the verge of death. You aren't mistaken. This earth vein spirit vine is indeed on the verge of death. I've tried many ways to save it, but my efforts were futile. Left with no choice, I could only invite everyone else here to brainstorm for a better idea. Garden owner Shue's eyes darkened. Earth vein spirit vines were the foundation to a herb garden, and if it dies, it won't be long before all of the medicinal herbs wither. By then, the entire herb field would be ruined. An elder took a look and remarked, since even garden owner Shue is helpless before the issue surrounding the earth vein spirit vine, we probably won't be able to come up with anything good either. His words received the approval of others as well. Judging by how garden owner Shue was able to cultivate so many superior medicinal herbs, her proficiency in the occupation was definitely extremely high. If even she was helpless before this issue, how could the rest of them possibly solve the problem? Seeing that the morale was low, an elder spoke up, you all shouldn't feel discouraged by it. If we put our heads together, we just might be able to find a solution to the problem. After all, this is the main reason why garden owner Shue invited us here today. Elder Lu is right. In the end, the strength of an individual is limited. If we work together, we just might be able to solve the problem. We have all dealt with medicinal herbs our entire life, so surely, we would have some secret techniques or nifty tricks of our own. Maybe if we try them all, we just might be able to save the earth vein spirit vine. As long as it's concerning medicinal herbs, we'll surely be able to find a way out. Hearing the words of the elder, everyone recovered from their low morale. The reward that garden owner Shue offered this time was too great. No one wanted to give up on such a good opportunity. They had no idea whether their solution would work or not, but what if it worked? That's my grandfather, the current head of the Lu clan. Seeing how everyone's morale lit up once more just because of a single word from Elder Lu, Lu Zhan immediately turned to Zhang Xian and explained it to him. Zhang Xian nodded silently. His eyes were fixated on the vine before him. The vine was massive, and the length exposed outside already stretched for a height of several hundred meters high. It was unimaginable how deep the vine underground extended. For such a bizarre plant to exist as well, nature was truly filled with wonders. Zhang Xian examined the leaves of the vine carefully with the eye of insight. That's not right. After taking a look, Zhang Xian frowned. The eye of insight should be capable of determining the current growth stage of the huge fellow and analyze it based on that. Even though it was inferior to the Library of Heaven's Path, it was more than sufficient to solve most problems. Logically speaking, given how the leaves of the tree were yellow and it was on the verge of death, the tree must either be ill, infested with worms, or coming to the end of its lifespan, but the eye of insight showed that wasn't the case. In other words, this earth vein spirit vine was perfectly healthy, but yet, it was plagued with an aura of death. From the looks of it, it wouldn't live past a few more days. It was as if a fit and healthy man was suddenly too weak to stand up. The situation was truly baffling. It was no wonder why garden owner Shue, despite banning entry to visitors and rejecting sales of medicinal herbs to even the Alliance head residents, suddenly gathered all of them here today and made such a generous offer. She must truly have been forced into a corner. While Zhang Xian was assessing the earth vein spirit vine, the others weren't lazing around either. After assessing the vine, Elder Lu suddenly spoke up. Hall Master Shue, you should have a deeper knowledge regarding the details of this earth vein spirit vine. May I know when the illness struck, what kind of symptoms there are, and what methods you've used to treat it so that we can all analyze the information? With just a single look, it was clear that the massive earth vein spirit vine was ill, and treating a medicinal herb, just like treating a human, required one to understand more about its condition. Only by learning about the cause and symptoms of the illness could one make deductions and decide on the most feasible treatment method. Chapter 522, Completely Helpless. Indeed, garden owner Shui, you should tell us about it. Otherwise, we'll just be grasping at straws. If we don't know about the situation, we won't be able to do anything about the earth vein spirit vine's condition. Why don't you tell us about it in greater detail so that we can find a better solution together? Elder Lu's words immediately had everyone nodding their heads. For garden owner Shui's reward, they decided to give it their best shot. Alright then, I'll talk about the condition of the earth vein spirit vine. Knowing that only after she revealed everything would everyone be able to come up with better solutions, garden owner Shui didn't reject the request. The earth vein spirit vine has always been healthy. Back when it wasn't ill, the vine was completely green, and its leaves were exceptionally lush. It exuded a deep aura of vitality that revitalizes all that approaches it. It was around half a year ago that everything changed. Half a year ago, a maid whom I tasked with looking after the herb field reported to me that a slight yellowish shade appeared on the spirit vein. Back then, I didn't believe her words, so I immediately rushed over to take a look. To my astonishment, that was indeed the case. Even so, as most herbologists should know, the color of the leaves changes with the seasons, and thus I didn't pay much heed to it. But 10 days later, the yellowish shade began to spread. From just a few leaves, it expanded to over half of the tree. By then, I finally realized that something was amiss and immediately tried to treat it. Since the leaves had turned yellow, I immediately turned my suspicions to the water source. After all, the cause of such conditions is frequently due to the water. So, I specially fetched the ice water from Tianhan Mountain and watered the vein with it. I thought that the issue with the yellow leaves would alleviate as time passed. But who could have known that a month later, the leaves of the entire spirit vein turned yellow instead, and even the veins within even had started to wither. Thus, I panicked. I immediately turned my attention to the soil, and after paying a heavy price, I changed the entire field of soil which the vine is absorbing nutrients from. However, there still wasn't any effect whatsoever. Thus, I found myself completely stumped. That's why I invited everyone over to help me on this matter. As she spoke, garden owner Shui shook her head in despair. Yellow leaves and withering veins under normal circumstances, it should be a matter of malnourishment or overnutrition. Has garden owner Shui tried tackling these issues yet? Elder Lu asked. I've given it a try already, but it's futile. Garden owner Shui shook her head. Let me give it a try. After hearing the explanation, an elder stepped forward from the crowd. It's Elder Lu. Which Elder Lu? Who else in the Myriad Kingdom city dares to call himself Elder Lu? Of course it's garden owner Lu of the herb garden in the north of the city. He's here too. The Northern Herb Garden is the second largest herb garden in Myriad Kingdom city. If even he fails, I doubt that there is anything else we can do. A commotion immediately broke out when everyone saw the elder who volunteered to give it a try. This fellow is very famous. Zhang Xian glanced at Lu Zhan doubtfully. Cough cough, Lu Zhan choked on his own saliva. Brother Zhang, this elder Lu was already a famous figure in Myriad Kingdom city 100 years ago. He once served as the Alliance Head Residence's imperial herbologist. In the past, my grandfather often consulted him on many affairs. In terms of qualifications, he is definitely the most senior herbologist in the entire Myriad Kingdom city. It can't be that you've never ever heard of his name. Lu Zhan felt as though he was going mad. While Lu Zhan was about to faint from insanity, Elder Lu had finally finished circling around the thick vine. The soil, water, air, and nutrition are all right. What is going on? Elder Lu frowned in confusion. Given his deep understanding of medicinal herbs, he was able to gauge whether the quality of soil, water, and such were fine just by looking at them. Those factors that could affect the healthy growth of the vine were all impeccable, and there was nothing to complain about them. Even so, the giant earth vein spirit vine was still dying. This bizarre situation had left him truly stumped. After contemplating for a moment, Elder Lu asked, "Garden owner Shui, could it be that this earth vein spirit vine has come to the end of its lifespan?" Garden owner Shui shook her head. End of its lifespan? That's impossible. Earth vein spirit vine can live more than 1,000 years, and this spirit vine has only lived for slightly more than 100 years. How could it have reached the end of its lifespan already? She had considered this possibility as well and analyzed the possibility. However, the vine was clearly pulsating with vitality, and the factors indicating that one had reached the end of its lifespan were all missing from the vine. Besides, even if its lifespan has reached its limit, it should slowly wither away from its stem. However, the leaves are turning yellow first instead of its veins. Clearly, its lifespan isn't up yet. You're right. Hearing the other party's analysis, Elder Lu couldn't help but shake his head. Pardon my lack of wisdom, but I am really unable to find the root of the problem. Thank you for your effort, Elder Lu. Seeing that Elder Lu was helpless before this matter, garden owner Shui's eyes darkened. Even so, she still replied politely. I apologize for being of no help. Elder Lu backed down and fell into deep thought. It seemed like this problem had truly left him stumped. Even Elder Lu is unable to solve the problem. Seeing Elder Lu admit that he was helpless before the matter, Lu Zhan suddenly recalled the young man's words and he widened his eyes in shock. Did Brother Zhang happen to be right, or did he really possess the eye of discernment to gauge that Elder Lu was unable to treat the earth vein spirit vine? Wasn't he completely unknowledgeable about herbology? Since Elder Lu is unable to do it, I doubt that I can be of help as well. Still, I wish to give it a try. Elder Lu stepped forward. Walking up to the vine, he knocked on several places carefully and tore off a part of the skin to analyze. After pondering for a long moment, he eventually shook his head and backed down, just like Elder Lu. Having come into contact with medicinal herbs for so many years, they were well versed with the common illnesses of the herbs. However, they had never seen an illness like that with the earth vein spirit vine before, and naturally, they were unable to find a solution for it. After the two most qualified elders failed, a few others stepped forward to give a look and offered some advice, but all of this advice was turned down by garden owner Shui. The ideas they proposed were normal and she had already tried them already, but to no avail. 2 hours later, all of the herbologists and garden owners had already given it a try but were helpless before the situation. There were some of the younger generation who hadn't given it a try yet, but most of them were only accompanying their elders to expand their horizon. As their level of skill paled to the others, they weren't able to come up with a feasible solution either. Does anyone else have any ideas? Seeing that no one could solve the problem despite inviting so many herbologists here, garden owner Shui's disappointment deepened. I can't think of anything else already. Garden owner Shui has already tested all of the ideas I can think of.
This really seems hopeless. Since even Elder Lu, and garden owner Shui are helpless before this matter, how can we come up with a better solution? It's no wonder why garden owner Shui is offering such a generous compensation. Indeed, it won't be easy to win her compensation. Hearing garden owner Shui's words, everyone shook their heads. Most people had given the earth vein spirit vine a look, but its affliction had surpassed their level of understanding. Even herbologists who had immersed themselves in the art for many years were unable to understand the situation at all, and they were stumped. All right, I've troubled everyone. A banquet is prepared at the hall, so do have some food before you leave. Seeing that no one else had any idea, garden owner Shui shook her head. Since she'd invited everyone here in the name of a banquet, naturally, she had prepared some delicious food and fine wine. I wasn't able to be of help and I feel embarrassed by my powerlessness. I think I shall pass on the banquet. I still have matter at home to attend to, so I'll be leaving first. Even though garden owner Shui was being hospitable, everyone's complexion didn't seem too well. But that was to be expected. Everyone here was a celebrity among herbologists, and yet, despite putting their heads together, they were unable to even find the cause of the illness. It was no wonder why they felt embarrassed. The illness of this earth vein spirit vine is indeed a little bizarre. It's not a big deal that you aren't able to find its affliction. After all, I'm the same as well. I hope that you all can remain and have your meal before leaving. Also, I happen to have something to ask of you all. Seeing the embarrassed expression on everyone's faces, garden owner Shui immediately understood what they were thinking and consoled them. Just as she was about to continue speaking, she suddenly froze. "That Gongzi over there, what are you doing?"
Hearing her words, everyone immediately turned their gaze over and saw a young man standing before the thick vines. He stretched out his hand and touched it lightly. After which, he walked around the vine once and went on to touch a few more valuable medicinal herbs before coming to a stop. What is he doing? Everyone was dumbstruck. Medicinal herbs needed a unique environment to grow. In fact, there were some medicinal herbs that were exceptionally sensitive and abhor a human's touch. As such, none of the crowd approached the earth vein spirit vine to touch it. Even if they did, they were all wearing gloves. After all, depending on the cultivation technique that the person cultivated, there was a possibility that one's touch might cause some unintended reaction with the medicinal herb, resulting in an unimaginable situation. There was once a young attribute expert who touched an attribute medicinal herb, and the medicinal herb withered on the spot. That was also the reason why herbologists cultivated neutral cultivation techniques. Even all of the herbologists were keeping their distance from the earth vein spirit vine for fear to exacerbating the situation, and yet, this fellow actually dared to sneak forward to touch it without any fear. What the hell? Don't you know the basic rules? Chapter 523, Are You a Pig? While everyone was dumbstruck, Lu Zhan leaped in shock and nearly fainted on the spot. Others might not know that young man, but he had been talking to him just a moment ago. Why, in a moment when his attention was elsewhere, the other party began walking casually around the herb garden, touching things randomly. Even though you know nothing about herbology, you could ask me about it. Even if you don't have any questions to ask, surely you should have noticed that no one is wandering about and deduced something from it. It's one thing for you to touch the earth vein spirit vine. That thing is humongous, and it probably won't die even if you slash it with all of your might. However, those spirit medicinal herbs are a huge taboo. Anxious, Lu Zhan racked his brain to find an excuse for the other party when the latter turned around, clapped his hands, and looked at the crowd nonchalantly. "Oh, I'm just trying to see if I can find a way to treat this earth vein spirit vine." "Treat?" Lu Zhan spurted blood. "Alright, I know that even a 4-star master teacher is fearful of you. However, after our previous conversation, it couldn't be more clear that you don't know a single thing about herbology. If one can find a solution just by touching a few things here and there, we, herbologists, would have lost our job long ago. If you're curious, just say it. Why must you spout such an obvious lie? Can't you see that so many people here are stumped by the issue already? What arrogant words! Who do you think you are to be spouting such haughty words here? If it's that easy to treat the earth vein spirit vine, Elder Lu, and the others would have long given suggestions. Do you think that a small brat like you has the right to butt in? Where did this fellow come from? Garden owner Chen, is he one of your men? I don't know him." As expected, upon hearing Zhang Xian's words, a huge uproar was immediately generated. So many master herbologists were unable to determine the illness at all. What can a fellow like you who hasn't even reached 20 yet possibly notice? Braggart. Garden owner Shui was also taken aback. A frown appeared on her forehead and she looked at Zhang Xian doubtfully. "Did you uncover anything?" "I did find something, but I might require garden owner Shui's assistance on this matter," the young man said. "Assistance? Feel free to speak. As long as it's within my means, I'll do it." Garden owner Shui nodded her head. Even though she shared the same sentiments as the crowd, she didn't think that this young man would be able to accomplish anything. She still wanted to give it a try. Good, the young man chuckled sheepishly and said, "Can you execute a punching routine for me?" Punching routine? Garden owner Shui was taken aback. The others in the area were also flabbergasted. Of all requests, they never thought that he would get garden owner Shui to execute a punching routine. Aren't we here to look at the earth vein spirit vine? What are you asking the owner to execute a punching routine for? Why does it sound like you are fooling with a monkey? Instead, if you execute a punching routine, I'll give you a peach. Audacious. How dare you tease the garden owner? You're courting death. Walala. Some of the younger herbologists immediately rushed up. Garden owner Shui was a famous figure even within the entire Myriad Kingdom city, not to mention, she was the owner of the #1 herb garden. To ask her to execute a punching routine all of a sudden, are you trying to make fun of her? Everyone, calm down. There must be some kind of misunderstanding here. Lu Zhang hurriedly stepped forward and intervened. Brother Zhang was a person who was likely to be a 4-star master teacher. Putting everyone else aside, even his grandfather couldn't afford to offend the other party. A young man harumphed furiously. A huge gust of wind blew at the crowd, nearly sending them tumbling into the distance. Even though it was a punch infused with energy from the environment, it was no simple feat to compress air to the point of forming a sonic boom with just an ordinary punch. At the very least, most transcendent mortal 4-dan pinnacle experts were incapable of such. It was no wonder why the other party was so feared by Alliance head Zhao. The strength of this garden owner Shui was indeed formidable. Is this all right? After executing her fist, garden owner Shui retracted her fist and looked at Zhang Xian quietly. Zhang Xian replied, seemingly confirmed something. Then, shaking his head, he looked at garden owner Shui with a sympathetic gaze. I know the problem your earth vein spirit vine is suffering from. But before that, I would like to ask you, garden owner Shui, and everyone immediately turned their gazes over. They had examined the earth vein spirit vine for so long, but they were still unable to tell what was wrong with it. On the other hand, the master teacher before them came to a conclusion just by viewing the garden owner's punching routine. Are you for real? Everyone pricked their ears in fear that they would miss out a single word that the young man would say. Following which, they heard a slightly lamenting voice sounded, are you a pig? Pooh! Garden owner Shui's body swayed and she nearly exploded. What did you say? Hong Long. Her aura suddenly surged as if a spark of flame had ignited a pot of hot oil. She was a renowned expert of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, the garden owner of the Western Herb Garden. Even a master teacher wasn't permitted to humiliate her like that. He said that garden owner Shui is a pig. Aren't master teachers known for being reliable and courteous? I've no idea either. The crowd widened their eyes in shock, and they nearly turned mad. To insult garden owner Shui by calling her a pig, this fellow's guts sure wasn't just extraordinarily big, it was about to break through the heavens. Lu Zhan also nearly bit his own tongue. I could mediate the matter regarding you touching the medicinal herbs by explaining that you're a master teacher. But now that you've insulted the garden owner publicly, how do you expect me to clean up your mess? If only I knew you were such a fiery figure, I would have never approached you now. All he could hope was for garden owner Shui not to blame the matter on the Lu clan as well. Song Chao, who had followed behind the crowd in hopes of exchanging the coffin back for his middle-tier spirit stone, also froze. As a 4-star master teacher, his eye of discernment was extraordinary. Even though garden owner Shui had only displayed a single move, he could tell that the latter's fighting prowess was impressive. Even the elders of his sect would find it hard to triumph over her. To say that such an expert was a pig, Zhang Shi sure dared to shoot his mouth. There were many different reactions from the crowd, but one thought they shared in common was that the young man before them was a lunatic. Allow me to finish my words first. Even though garden owner Shui was already on the verge of snapping, Zhang Xian didn't seem worried in the least. Instead, he nonchalantly waved his hands and pointed at the earth vein spirit vine. If I'm not mistaken, you often cultivate here, right? That's right. Garden owner Shui replied. However, her rage wasn't placated yet. If it wasn't in consideration of the other party's identity as a master teacher, she would have charged forward and killed the other party with a slap long ago. Due to the innumerable spirit herbs in the herb field, cultivating here could calm one's mind and make it easier for one to achieve a breakthrough. You mean that the issue with the earth vein spirit vine is related with my cultivation? Frowning, garden owner Shui harumphed. Not only is it related, it is the root of the problem. Zhang Xian shook his head. Let me tell you the true problem with the earth vein spirit vine. It is not it is ill, neither is it manifested with bugs, and it definitely isn't at the end of its lifespan. What it is suffering from was loss of spirit and soul. Loss of spirit and soul. Everyone was taken aback. Zhang Xian explained, all sentient beings in the world possess spirit, and a spirit herb, just like spirit tier weapons, possesses spirit. As the centerpiece of the herb garden, if the earth vein spirit vine doesn't possess a spirit, how do you think it's able to allocate the required nutrients to each individual medicinal herb accurately? Everyone nodded their heads. Upon reaching spirit tier, weapons, tools, and even medicinal herb would gain spirit. This was how the term spirit herb came about. It was precisely due to the possession of spirit that they would reject cultivators whose jinqi didn't align with them, grow faster upon hearing and seeing melodies and dances that delighted them, and discern whether one was a maiden. Without spirit, the earth vein spirit vine would have lost an important part of itself. Under such circumstances, it is inevitable that it would carry an aura of death. A spirit herb losing its spirit is equivalent to a human losing its soul, so I can understand why the earth vein spirit vine is on the verge of death, but what does it have to do with garden owner Shui's cultivation? Everyone was perplexed. Instead of answering the question, Zhang Xian turned to garden owner Shui and said, if I'm not mistaken, garden owner Shui has been stuck in transcendent mortal for Dan clarifying turbidity realm for at least 7 to 8 decades already. 87 years. Garden owner Shui nodded her head. Having been stuck in the same realm for 87 years, it would be a lie if one were to say that one is not interested in making a breakthrough. However, Transcendent Mortal 5 Dan Consonant Spirit Realm is the first difficult hurdle of the 9 Dawn of the Transcendent Mortal stage. It requires one's soul to be completely harmonized with the surroundings and achieving consonance to accomplish a breakthrough. The reason why garden owner Shui has been stuck in the same realm is not due to her lack of talent but that her soul is damaged. Zhang Xian said. How did you know? Garden owner Shui's body abruptly stiffened upon hearing those words. She was still extremely furious a moment ago, ready to slaughter the fellow before her at any moment. However, upon hearing those words, the jinqi that she had gathered abruptly dissipated out of shock. Her soul was indeed damaged. Otherwise, given her talent, she would have long achieved a breakthrough. She wouldn't have been stuck in the same realm for 87 years. But this matter was a secret which she had never told anyone about. How in the world did the young man before her learn of it? It doesn't matter how I know of that matter. Even though your soul is damaged, you didn't give up like everyone else. Rather, you sought to repair the damage through different means. It seemed like you heard rumors that the spirit contained within spirit herbs could heal the damage, and so, you created this herb garden and cultivated medicinal herbs. The reason why you refuse to sell them is so that you can absorb the spirit contained within them to mend the tear in your soul. Your persistence is admirable, but you went down the wrong path right from the start. If the spirit of a medicinal herb could make up for the deficiencies in a human, wouldn't that mean that anyone and everyone could reach consonant spirit realm? Zhang Xian looked at garden owner Shui with a look of disappointment. Despite being a master herbologist, despite living beside spirit herbs for so long, you were unable to see through this fact. What else can you be if not a pig? Chapter 524, Treating the Spirit Vine. Garden owner Shue's face flushed red. She wanted to lash out, but she couldn't find a word to say. As the #1 garden owner of Myriad Kingdom City, her level of comprehension toward medicinal herbs was in no way inferior to Elder Lu and Elder Lu, or perhaps, she might even be above them. This was precisely the reason why no one thought well of the situation after learning that even she was helpless before the problem of the earth vein spirit vine. Spirit herb and spirit tools, even though there was a spirit in their names, they were different from the souls of humans. Even though unique spirit herbs could nourish one's soul, there had never been a case where one could heal one's soul through absorbing the spirit contained within a spirit herb. The nature of the two were completely different from the start. It was just like how one couldn't expect a tiger to feast on grass like a goat when it's hungry. The crowd was astonished. Garden owner Shue was the most knowledgeable herbologist of their group. How could she possibly make such a fundamental error? It was no wonder why she refused to sell the medicinal herbs which she had nurtured. So, this was the reason. Since she hoped to heal her wounded soul through the spirit of the medicinal herbs, naturally, the more spirit herbs there were, the more effective the treatment should be. To a cultivator, there was no price too great to reach the consonant spirit realm. Just that, these were all her deepest secrets. How did this fellow learn of it? Everyone had examined the situation for so long, but they were unable to uncover the problem with the earth vein spirit vine. It was also completely out of their imagination that garden owner Shue would act like this just by touching the vine and watching a punching routine from garden owner Shue. That young man was actually able to deduce so much. Could things get any more exaggerated? Lu Zhan and Song Chao's eyes were also completely widened. They both knew that Zhang Xian was a capable master teacher, but they never thought that he would be that formidable. When garden owner Shue first entered the banquet hall, I had already noticed that something was amiss. Judging from her jinqi and vitality, she should only be in her early hundreds. It's normal for a woman to value her appearance, and under normal circumstances, she should have never looked that old unless there was something causing it. Zhang Xian continued, thus, I paid close attention to the punching routine she executed just now. If I'm not mistaken, the fist art used was Great Heliacal Punch. Going by the conventional jinqi pathway for the technique, one's jinqi should gush out from the baixin acupoint. Yet, she deviated slightly such that the jinqi came out from her zhangxin acupoint instead. As a transcendent mortal 4-dan expert, her grasp of cultivation should have already reached an incredible level. As such, there is only one explanation behind this peculiarity: her Huiming acupoint is damaged, causing her to be unable to discern between the minute differences in her acupoints. Huiming is an acupoint governing one's perception, and it is one of the most important acupoints that determining the wholeness of one's soul. Since it's damaged, naturally, her soul must be damaged as well. I believe everyone should have seen the earth vein spirit vine for themselves. It isn't ill, and it isn't infested with bugs either. Yet, it's withering, and nothing seemed to work on it. At the very start, I also didn't think that it might be due to its spirit being absorbed until I saw the area where I deduced to be where garden owner Shue often cultivates. At which, Zhang Xian pointed toward the area where he touched the medicinal herbs previously. Everyone turned their gazes over. The grass growing in that area was both lush and green, seemingly faring much better than anywhere else in the herb field. I believe everyone can see that the grass in that area is growing much better than anywhere else in the herb field. When cultivating, spiritual energy would be drawn into one's surroundings, which would in turn nourish the plants in the area and allow them to grow better. However, take a look at this. Stepping forward, Zhang Xian stretched out his hand toward the grass. Who? The grass seemed to have seen something fearsome, and despite the lack of wind, they hurriedly avoided his hand. This is just ordinary grass that can be found everywhere. It shouldn't possess any spirit, and yet, it is now avoiding my hand on its own accord. From this, it can be deduced that someone has been absorbing spirit from the medicinal herbs, thus granting even ordinary plants like this to possess the ability to avoid harm. Chuckling lightly, with this, it isn't too difficult to deduce the rest. This, as expected of a master teacher, what frightening eye of discernment. Hearing the other party's explanation, everyone couldn't help but feel awed. They had long heard of a master teacher's fearsome discernment ability, and from the looks of it now, they indeed lived up to their name. With just a punching routine and a field of grass, the other party was able to deduce the entire story. If not for the fact that they were witnessing this situation for themselves, they would have never dared believe this to be possible. This Song Chao swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and his face turned pale. The other party's deduction was completely rational, and he couldn't find any problem with it. While the other party had spoken of it easily, he knew that it was no easy feat to do so. Even a 4-star master teacher like him was incapable of doing the same. In fact, even his teacher and the elders of his sect couldn't possibly tell so much with just a glance. To uncover the root of the problem through examining insignificant details like this, linking up all of the evidences to put together a whole picture, not to mention, they had to fit together perfectly. Was this fellow actually a seer? Even a 5-star master teacher should be incapable of doing so. Or could the fellow before him actually be a 5-star master teacher? That would explain why he fell for the other party's impartation of heaven's will easily. Only now did he realize that there was a huge gap between him and this Zhang Xian. Song Chao was depressed. It seems like it'll be impossible for me to take back my middle-tier spirit stone. If I were really to ask him for it, I might even lose those low-tier spirit stones of mine. He was beguiled every single time he tried to approach the other party. He was afraid that not only would he fail to get back his middle-tier spirit stone, all of the fortune that he had raked up with great difficulty might even be swiped clean. Forget it, I should just bring this coffin back. Perhaps, if the elder is happy with this, I might be able to recoup my losses. Zhang Xian's means had truly left Song Chao terrified. But at the same time, he was also earnestly impressed by the other party as well. To be able to deduce the entire situation with just a few minor clues, as expected of a master teacher who could beguile him. While everyone was overwhelmed by shock, garden owner Shue's body was trembling violently in disbelief. I found that method in an ancient book, and throughout the years, the damage on my soul has indeed alleviated a bit. Back then, when her soul was injured, she was doomed to be unable to reach consonant spirit realm in her entire life. However, she didn't believe it, and after flipping through innumerable ancient texts, she finally found the method of absorbing spirit from medicinal herbs to nourish her own soul. Even though she carried her doubts to the feasibility of the solution, she had no other better alternatives. Besides, after years of hard work, her damaged soul had indeed recovered to a small extent. Alleviated a bit? Zhang Xian shook his head. Aren't you still very far from making a full recovery? Do you think that you can live for another 80 years? Garden owner Shue's body trembled. There was a limit to the lifespan of a transcendent mortal expert. Being beyond 100, she had already lived half of her lifespan. At the rate which she was recovering at, could her soul possibly make a full recovery before she comes to an end of her lifespan? Even if it did, what use would it be when she was already knocking on death's door? Then what was the use of it in the first place? I was wrong, all along. Garden owner Shui had been thinking of how she could heal her own soul and attempt to break into the consonant spirit realm. However, at this moment, she finally realized that it was nothing more than a pipe dream. Consonant spirit realm was destined to be beyond her reach. Shaking her head, she seemed to have suddenly aged decade in an instant. Seeing her state, even though everyone felt sympathy, they couldn't find any suitable words to console her. She had driven herself with this faith for 80 years, and yet, her bubble was burst in an instant. No one could take such a blow lightly. After a long period of time, garden owner Shui finally pulled herself together and asked the young man before her, Zhang Shi, is there any way to save this earth vein spirit vine? Since the other party was able to determine the problem with a glance, perhaps he might have a solution for the problem. Since her fate was sealed, she decided not to struggle any longer. However, this herb garden had accompanied her for more than half of her life. She didn't want to see it destroyed just like that. As you have cultivated here frequently over many years, this vine is nothing more than an empty shell now. It'll be difficult to revert it back to its original state. However, I do have a solution in mind, but it will be expensive. Zhang Xian said. If it was before the trip to the Soul Oracle tomb, given his limited understanding of souls then, it would indeed be difficult for him to deal with such a problem. However, after attaining Mo Huansheng's lifetime worth of knowledge and comprehension, his understanding towards souls had reached an extremely profound level. Even though the earth vein spirit vine was on the verge of dying, he was still able to treat it. Just that, it might take a little more effort. Upon hearing that there was hope, garden owner Shui hurriedly said in agitation, "As long as you can save it, I'm willing to pay any price." Everyone else also turned their gazes over. Even expert herbologists like them had never heard that a spirit herb losing its spirit could be treated. Thus, they were intent to learn a thing or two from this. The solution is actually quite simple: grafting. Zhang Xian said. Grafting? Everyone was perplexed. As herbologists, the term grafting wasn't foreign to them. It consisted of implanting a bud onto the stem of another plant to form a whole plant. Many new spirit herbs were created through this mean. That's right. Plants can be grafted, spirits are the same as well. Zhang Xian chuckled lightly. As long as you can find another earth vein spirit vine bud with intact spirit and graft it to this spirit vein, over time, the spirit of the bud will fuse together with the original earth vein spirit vine, thus forming one entity. If the grafting succeeded, the two plants would become one, and the spirit of the original earth vein spirit vine would be replenished. However, given the normal rate of growth of earth vein spirit vines, it'll be hard to succeed without decades passing. By then, all of the medicinal herbs in your herb garden would have long died. Thus, the growth of the earth vein spirit vine must be hastened, and the price of doing so will be extremely heavy. The concept of grafting was simple in theory, but it was terribly difficult in practice. Firstly, the implantation of the spirit from the bud onto the earth vein spirit vine would already require the ability of a soul oracle, thus making it out of question for almost all herbologists. Also, during the fusing process, one had to ensure that the original earth vein spirit vine would not reject the bud. In truth, this grafting was no different from possession. Even though the original earth vein spirit vine was empty at the moment, it would still be difficult for the immature spirit of a bud to possess the body of such a huge vein. It was just like an ant trying to pull a carriage. And the price for hastening the growth of the spirit would be extremely hefty. What do you need? I'll prepare it all now. Garden owner Shui gritted her teeth. If the earth vein spirit vine were to die, all of the medicinal herbs in the herb garden would die. Her loss would only be greater then. An earth vein spirit vine bud, 50 medicinal herbs with at least 100 years of maturity, 10 buckets of stemless water. Zhang Xian began reciting the things he required for the operation. Hearing those words, the crowd stared at one another with an awful complexion. The price was indeed a heavy one to pay. Ordinary herbologist clans would surely be unable to take out all of these things, let alone use them to save a single plant. All right, I'll prepare them now. Hearing the items that were required, garden owner Shui's eyebrows twitched as well. Even so, it was still within an acceptable range for her. Wait a moment. Just as she was about to prepare the goods, the young man's voice sounded once more. Prepare a sentiment drowning flower as well. It'll be best if it has a maturity of 500 years and above. Also, bring as many middle-tier spirit stones as you can. Chapter 525, Nurturing Soul Rouse Grass, Success. Sentiment drowning flower. All right. Garden owner Shui nodded. But soon, her face reddened in embarrassment as she said, as for middle-tier spirit stone, I only have one here. She had a few sentiment drowning flowers in her herb garden, and the oldest one had already reached a maturity of 700 years. However, as for middle-tier spirit stones, even a transcendent mortal 4-dan pinnacle expert like her only had one in her possession. Only a Tier 2 empire like Huanyu Empire had the rights to trade a spirit stone of that tier. The Myriad Kingdom Alliance usually traded using low-tier spirit stones. Even the royal family could only take out a few pieces at once, let alone her. Only one. One is fine as well. Zhang Xian nodded. The sentiment drowning flower was for his personal interest, but the middle-tier spirit stone wasn't. For the spirit of a weak plant to grow swiftly, the pure spiritual energy in a middle-tier spirit stone was a necessity. If he were to only use low-tier spirit stones, the process would take significantly longer. I'll go make the preparations now. Garden owner Shui hurriedly left. Soon, she returned. It would be difficult for others to gather the items that Zhang Xian had asked for, and it would be impossible to do so without several months of effort. However, as the #1 herb garden in Myriad Kingdom City, the herb garden had nearly all of the medicinal herbs that Zhang Xian needed. As such, it didn't take too long for her to gather it all. In fact, she even managed to find a bud of the earth vein spirit vine. I require absolute tranquility for my treatment. Garden owner Shui, I'll have to ask you to invite everyone out of the premises. Seeing that everything was prepared, Zhang Xian waved his hands. Grafting the spirit of the bud onto the original earth vein spirit vine would require him to use the ability of a soul oracle. Even though its inheritance had already terminated long ago and very few would be able to recognize it, Zhang Xian felt that it would be better to be safe than sorry. Yes. Garden owner Shui knew that such means tended to be an exclusive secret, and it was normal for one to be unwilling to show it in public. Thus, she nodded her head and led the group out of the herb field. Only after seeing that everyone had left did Zhang Xian heave a huge sigh of relief. Looking at the spirit vine bud before him, Zhang Xian drew out his soul and began the treatment. Why is Zhang Shi not out yet? Do you think that he'll be able to get the sentiment drowning flower? In the banquet hall, Zhao Feiwu and Jin Songhai walked about nervously, shooting glances at the herb field from time to time. Only herbologists and master teachers were allowed to enter the spirit field. As Zhang Shi's accompaniment, they weren't permitted entry. As such, they could only wait outside. Who knew that this wait would take 5 to 6 hours? The sky had already set but he hadn't returned yet. This had left them anxious and worried. Jin Songhai hesitated for a moment before saying, "It should be fine after all, he's Zhang Shi." Ever since he'd become acquainted with that young man, no matter what the other party did, he would be able to accomplish it easily. He truly made one suspect whether there was anything he was incapable of. I know Zhang Shi's capability, but garden owner Shui's eccentric personality is well known throughout the capital. She doesn't even hesitate to disregard father. Considering that an issue had cropped up with the earth vein spirit vine, she must be even more anxious now. It probably won't be easy for him to purchase the required medicinal herb from her under such circumstances. I'm afraid that, as soon as Zhang Shi speaks, the other party might chase him out straight away. Even though Zhao Feiwu admired Zhang Shi's capability, she was still worried for the latter. After all, this garden owner Shui was someone who couldn't be forced to do anything. Everything was based on her mood. If she was in good mood, she could sell you anything you wish for as long as you had money to pay her, but given that her entire herb field was on the verge of dying, her mood must be terrible. It would be highly difficult for Zhang Shi to purchase medicinal herbs from her. Perhaps, Zhang Shi might even be chased out before he got a chance to speak. After all, such things had happened before. This was exactly what happened with the envoy of the Alliance head residence back then. That now that you speak of it, it does seem possible. Worry also flashed across Jin Songhai's eyes. Zhang Shi seems determined to obtain that sentiment drowning flower. If it comes down to it, I'll plead with my father to help him. With his help, garden owner Shui should probably at least give it some thought. A moment later, after seeing that Zhang Xian wasn't back then, Zhao Feiwu couldn't help but declare. But even she was unconfident about the matter. After all, if her father's name was effective, the envoy wouldn't have been chased out back then. Garden owner Shui was powerful and didn't give in to threat or persuasion. Even though Zhao Feiwu tended to be witty when dealing such matters, she couldn't find a single solution to this problem. Before absolute power, all strategy was meaningless. We can only hope so. Look, someone is coming. Jin Songhai nodded. Just as he was about to console Zhao Feiwu, he suddenly caught sight of a figure before him and pointed. A silhouette was slowly walking toward the banquet hall. It's Zhang Shi, it was the person whom they had been talking about all this while, Zhang Xian. Without a doubt, he must have been chased out. Seeing him appear alone, Zhao Feiwu said bitterly before walking up to him with Jin Songhai. Zhang Shi, you're out. Don't worry about being unable to get the sentiment drowning flower. I'll help you plead with my father to stand up for you. Seeing the pale and wearied face of the young man before her, Zhao Feiwu deduced that he must have suffered great humiliation and hurriedly consoled. Indeed. Garden owner Shui is known for being eccentric and difficult, so you need not worry too much about it, Jin Songhai said. Ah. Before Zhang Xian could say anything, he ended up being consoled by the duo. He didn't know whether he should cry or laugh at this situation. Just as he was about to explain what truly happened, some hurried footsteps suddenly sounded. Garden owner Shui and a few other people rushed into the banquet hall. What do you all intend to do? Seeing the anxious look on their faces, Jin Songhai stepped forward to shield Zhang Xian and the princess. Zhang Shi, here is 100 medicinal herbs with a maturity of 500 years. It's a token of my appreciation, so do accept it. Furthermore, from today onward, you shall be an eternal friend of my Western herb garden. If you have anything you need, feel free to speak. I'll supply you everything within my means for free. Disregarding the anxious Jin Songhai, garden owner Shui walked up to Zhang Xian, bowed deeply, and passed a storage ring over. Eternal friend? Free. Seeing the eccentric garden owner Shui who dared to even snub the Alliance head residents, bowing to Zhang Xian and even gifting him with medicinal herbs, Zhao Feiwu and Jin Songhai's eyes widened in shock. What in the world happened? Wasn't this fellow supposed to be an incredibly obstinate person? Why did she suddenly bow as though a humble student, even going to the extent of gifting so many precious herbs? Compared to Zhang Shi, our proficiency as herbologists is indeed lacking. It's all thanks to Zhang Shi's credit that the earth vein spirit vine was revived. Just as they were perplexed over what was going on, they suddenly heard the discussion of the returning crowd. Zhang Shi has cured the earth vein spirit vine? Coming to a realization, the duo stared at one another frenziedly. They had heard Zhang Shi's discussion with Lu Zhan previously. For a fellow who didn't even know what a herbologist was to fix the earth vein spirit vine, which stumped even the master herbologists, why did it sound like something that came out from a novel? Not only did Zhang Shi manage to buy the sentiment drowning flower, he was even escorted out of the herb garden by garden owner Shui, and the latter promised to supply him with whatever medicinal herbs he needed in the future. On top of that, you said that he treated the earth vein spirit vine? In the Alliance head residence, Alliance head Zhao widened his eyes in shock as he heard the report from his daughter and Jin Songhai. For a very long time, he was unable to recover from his shock. Seated cross-legged within a room, Zhang Xian stared at the crimson flower before him. A fresh sentiment drowning flower with a maturity of 700 years. With sufficient medicinal herbs and the means of a soul oracle, it wasn't too difficult to graft the spirit vine bud onto the original earth vein spirit vine. Naturally, after he succeeded, garden owner Shui immediately thanked him profusely. His motive at the herb garden this time around was the sentiment drowning grass. After obtaining what he needed, he immediately returned back to the Alliance head residence with Zhao Feiwu and Jin Songhai and shut himself within a room in the lodgings that Zhao Feiwu prepared for him. It was an average-sized residence, but it was very close to the Alliance head residence. There were guards, servants, and maids residing in the residence, so Sun Chang was spared the additional effort of hiring them. After arranging a resting spot for the demon sink beast, Zhang Xian returned back to his room and took out the sentiment drowning flower. I have to draw my soul out first. A soul slowly gushed out from his acupoint. Raising his hand, the flower before his physical body flew to him. To nurture a soul-rouse grass, one has to inscribe a formation to gather soul energy on a plant capable of harnessing soul energy, after which, one has to supply soul energy to the plant so hasten its growth. Recalling the cultivation method of a soul-rouse grass, Zhang Xian's sight fell on the flower before him. Even though the sentiment drowning flower was a spirit herb, it didn't possess sentience. As such, it was easier for it to house the soul energy of a soul oracle. If it was any other sentient medicinal herb, the herb might be destroyed as soon as he tried to infuse his soul energy into it. Naturally, he would be unable to successfully nurture a soul-rouse grass like that. Driving his soul energy, a powerful energy enveloped the flower, slowly morphing the appearance and shape of the flower. After cultivating the Heaven's Path soul art, Zhang Xian's soul energy in itself had already reached the level equivalent to the strength of a transcendent mortal Dan cultivator, and that was even above that of his Jinqi cultivation. The cultivation of soul-rouse grass wasn't easy, but given his current level of soul energy, it wasn't an issue. Thus, he spent 3 days holed up in his room. Finally, on the 4th day, the crimson flower before him shook and turned into a white seedling. The nurturing of the soul-rouse grass was a success. Now, I only have to nourish it with my soul energy every day. It should mature within 2 months. Zhang Xian nodded his head in satisfaction. The sentiment drowning grass had been successfully cultivated into a soul-rouse grass, but as it was still a seedling, it couldn't be used yet. However, Zhang Xian was in no hurry either. In just 1 or 2 months' time, it should mature fully. Once he crafts the soul-rouse incense with it, he would be able to save Lu Chong. The past 3 days of exerting his soul energy in his room had left him slightly wearied. Returning his soul back to his body, he took out the middle-tier spirit stone he obtained from Song Chao and absorbed it. After he had recovered from his fatigue, he walked out of the room. The sun hung high in the sky, and even before walking into the main hall, Zhang Xian saw Sun Chang walking over. "Young master, Su Shi and Ling Shi are here to meet you." Su Shi, Su Fan, and Ling Shi, Ling Yuheng, were the 2 4-star master teachers who'd invited him to participate in the master teacher pavilion back when he was still in Tianwu Kingdom. How did they know that I was here? Zhang Xian was taken aback for a moment before shaking his head upon coming to a realization. Zhang Xian hadn't concealed his trail ever since arriving at the Myriad Kingdom city. He even went to the Western Herb Garden to solve the issue surrounding the Earth Vein Spirit Vine. As one of the most powerful organizations in the region, it wasn't difficult for the Master Teacher Pavilion to discover his location. Zhang Xian had previously said that he would look for them as soon as he arrived at Myriad Kingdom City. However, it had been a few days since his arrival and yet he hadn't gone to the Master Teacher Pavilion yet. Most probably, they were getting impatient and thus they came here looking for him. Let's go and take a look. Understanding the situation, Zhang Xian strode off, heading to the main hall. Chapter 526, Selection Round. Stepping into the lounge, Zhang Xian saw Su Shi and Ling Shi seated on the chairs by the side. Upon seeing him, the duo seemed visibly relieved. If not for the ruckus he had caused at the herb garden a while ago, they wouldn't have known that Zhang Shi was already in the city. As soon as Zhang Xian entered, Su Shi immediately stared at him expectantly and asked, "May I know if Yang Shi is in Myriad Kingdom City as well?" Back in Tianwu Kingdom, Yang Shi had helped him reach the 7th circulation of the miniature solar art, thus inducing a huge leap in his cultivation. Even until now, he was still grateful to the other party for his help. Inviting Zhang Xian over to the master-teacher pavilion was only one of the reasons behind his visit. The other one was to meet his benefactor. After all, the other party was a master-teacher who was likely to exceed 6-star. Otherwise, there was no need for the two of them to come personally just to meet a 2-star master-teacher. My teacher is currently wandering around the lands. I have no idea where he is either. Zhang Xian replied. The teacher Zhang Xian spoke of was actually referring to Zhang Xian himself. It was already so difficult for him to fool this duo, given that there were so many experts here. If he were to get caught playing off as Yang Shi here, he would surely be a goner. In any case, just the existence of Yang Shi itself was sufficient to induce fear in others. There was no need for him to take such a risk. If people were to realize that Yang Shi was actually a fake, the entire situation could backlash on him. Upon hearing that Yang Shi wasn't around, Su Shi and Ling Shi shook their heads in disappointment. However, they soon recovered and said, "In truth, Ling Shi and I are here because we have something we require your help on." Su Shi, please speak. Zhang Xian nodded. It's like that. We have invited you to participate in the master-teacher tournament before. May I know if Yang Shi has talked to you about the matter yet? Su Shi asked. Back then, in Tianwu Kingdom, they had once brought up the matter with Zhang Xian, but Zhang Xian seemed to be slightly hesitant about agreeing. In the end, it was Yang Shi who accepted it in his stead. Even though Yang Shi said he would persuade Zhang Shi on their behalf, it was best to double confirm the matter before jumping into any conclusion. My teacher has told me about it. As long as I become the champion, I'll be rewarded with middle-tier spirit stones. Don't worry, I've agreed to it already. Zhang Xian nodded his head. Cough cough, choking on their saliva, Su Shi and Ling Shi fell speechless. Champion? You sure know how to dream. 28 powers consisting of innumerable experts. Your talent might be formidable, but they are also geniuses, and not to mention, they have cultivated longer than you. Our motive in looking for you is just in hopes that you could win us a better placing. Even top 10 seems out of reach, champion. They would only dare to say such words in their dreams. It's like that. The Master-Teacher Tournament is a battle among the geniuses of the 28 powers, and our Myriad Kingdom Alliance is given the privilege of playing host this year. Pavilion Master Kong hopes for us to get a better ranking this year. Thus we gathered the top-notch geniuses from throughout the lands for them to pit it out in advance and narrow the group down to just 2 to participate in the tournament. After hesitating for a moment, Su Fan spoke his motive. Pit it out in advance? Yes. A total of 6 candidates have been nominated by the elders, Su Shi said. As the Myriad Kingdom Alliance was hosting the Master-Teacher Tournament this time around, Pavilion Master Kong regarded this event very highly and he hoped that they could win a much better placing from before. As such, he passed down an order for the elders to nominate the most talented genius they could find, and it was for this purpose that Su Shi and Ling Shi visited Tianwu Kingdom. However, they weren't the only elders in the Master-Teacher Pavilion. The others also made their nominations too, and a total of 6 candidates were chosen. The duo had to spend a lot of effort to confirm Zhang Xian's placing as a candidate as well. Otherwise, given Zhang Xian's identity as a 2-star master teacher, how could he possibly be qualified to compete with all the other geniuses? What you mean is that you wish for me to participate in an internal selection round conducted by the Alliance's Master Teacher Pavilion? Zhang Xian quickly understood what the other party was driving at. That's right. Only 2 participants from each power are allowed for the Master Teacher Pavilion. Thus, there's a need for us to conduct a selection round among the 6 candidates. The 2 finalized candidates will become a target of grooming for the Master Teacher Pavilion for the next 2 months so as to prepare them for the Master Teacher Tournament. Su Shi said. The most practical way of getting a good placing was to train harder. Even if it was a last-minute effort, 2 months should be sufficient to achieve significant results. After hearing the explanation, Zhang Xian came to a realization. The Master-Teacher Tournament was a huge event which the Myriad Kingdom Alliance and 27 other powers were involved with. Even with Su Shi and Ling Shi's recommendations, the Alliance couldn't give the slot so easily to him. After all, he came from a humble kingdom. It had only been 3 months since his rise, and it was extremely normal for him to be doubted by others. Zhang Xian didn't think much of the situation. In any case, he was also curious to see where he ranked among the geniuses of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. After settling Lu Chang's matter, he would concentrate his effort on cultivating so as to reach 9-star Master Teacher before 30. Otherwise, once the innate fetal poison made its move, everything would be for naught. Having read through innumerable books, Zhang Xian learned that master teachers weren't just about strength and capability. Reputation was also of essence. Reputation was credibility, and without a good reputation, how could a master teacher win the trust of others? As such, this was one of the less tangible criteria taken into account when one was applying for a promotion. And the easiest way to accrue reputation was to join the master teacher tournament. Besides, to raise his cultivation, Zhang Xian needed innumerable cultivation techniques to form the Heaven's Path divine art and sufficient middle-tier spirit stones. Even though Zhang Xian was skilled in the art of beguiling, there was a limit to what he could gather through such. If he could achieve incredible results during the Master Teacher Tournament, it should become much easier for him to gather spirit stones. After thinking all of these through, Zhang Xian had nothing to hesitate about anymore. Thus, he asked, when does the selection round begin? According to Pavilion Master Kang's intentions, it's supposed to be conducted a few days ago. However, you had yet to appear and so, the both of us tried all ways to postpone the selection round. Now that you're here, we can finally begin. Seeing that the young man before them didn't reject the matter, Su Shi and Ling Shi heaved a sigh of relief. After all, they had to fight very hard to delay the selection round by several days, and there were many who were displeased by their action. If Zhang Xian were to really refuse to join the selection round, they would be in trouble. Is it conducted in the Master Teacher Pavilion? Zhang Xian asked. That's right. The duo nodded their heads. Then let's go over then. Zhang Xian stood up. Since he had decided on the matter, there was nothing for him to hesitate about. Seeing that Zhang Xian was in a rush to head over, the duo smiled bitterly. Zhang Shi, hold on for a moment. Allow me to introduce to you the other candidates first. This way, you will be prepared when you meet them. Of the 5 candidates, 3 are from the Myriad Kingdom Alliance Master Teacher Pavilion. The most famous among them is Ruohuan Gongzi, Jun Ruohuan. He's the head of the 4 gentlemen in Myriad Kingdom City, the direct disciple of Pavilion Master Kong. He's 29 this year, and he passed his 4-star examination at the start of the year, thus making him a full-fledged 4-star primary master teacher. Zhang Xian nodded his head. He had seen a 4-star primary master teacher genius before as well, Song Chao. Even though that fellow seemed a little slow-witted before him, as a 4-star master teacher, he surely possessed an astonishing eye of discernment and unbelievable talent. Jun Ruohuan should be the same as well. After him is the direct disciple of the Master Teacher Pavilion's elder Hai, Fu Shaochen, Fu Shi. He was evaluated as a 3-star pinnacle master teacher 2 years ago, and since then, he hasn't taken any examinations at all. Thus, no one knows the current extent of his ability. Even so, based on my estimates, he should be on par with Ruohuan Gongzi. These 2 are the most popular candidates this time around, and thus, they will be your greatest competitors as well. As for the remaining 3, one of them is Elder Feng's disciple while the other 2 are picked out from the vassal kingdoms under the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. They are all 3-star pinnacle master teachers under 30 as well. Su Shi quickly briefed Zhang Xian on the background of the other 5 candidates. Even the weakest of them is a 3-star pinnacle master teacher. Zhang Xian was astonished. One would already be considered as an incredible talent for reaching 2-star beneath 30 in Xianyuan Kingdom, and yet here, there were 5 who far exceeded that level, and one of them had even reached 4-star. As expected of the alliance, the center of power and affluence of the innumerable kingdoms. Thinking that Zhang Xian might have lost his confidence, Su Shi consoled, "Indeed, but you need not worry about that. Your master-teacher rank might be beneath them, but your eye of discernment and knowledge are in no way inferior to them. I think that you still stand a good chance." If not for the latter's outstanding performance in Tianwu Kingdom previously, the duo wouldn't have gone to such extensive recommending him. After all, an ordinary 2-star master-teacher wouldn't stand a chance against that lineup at all. What will be tested in the master-teacher tournament? Zhang Xian asked doubtfully. He had only heard briefly about the master-teacher tournament from the duo, and as such, he didn't know much detail about it. The books he had read also had a limited description on the matter. "You don't know?" The duo was taken aback for a moment before they flew into a frenzy. "Yang Shi didn't explain the matter to you?" They had told Yang Shi about Zhang Shi's participation in the master-teacher tournament back in Tianwu Kingdom, and so, they thought that Yang Shi would at least offer some guidance or advice to Zhang Shi beforehand. If that was the case, with the guidance from a 6-star or above master-teacher, they would stand a much better chance. But who knew that after so long, Zhang Shi actually knew nothing at all? "Are you mistaken?" Half of the reason why the duo insisted on having Zhang Shi participate in the competition was because of his outstanding performance, and the other half was due to their trust in Yang Shi's teaching capability. Since Yang Shi had agreed on the matter, surely he wouldn't make his student embarrass himself. But why in the world did Zhang Shi not know anything at all?
"My teacher hasn't told me anything about it," Zhang Xian replied. Hearing the other party's reply, the duo rolled their eyes. Was Yang Shi simply that courageous, or did he possess absolute trust in his student? Shaking his head, Su Shi could only start explaining the matter helplessly. The master-teacher tournament assesses a master-teacher on his overall capability. The test varies every year, but they are centered around the fundamentals of master-teachers, such as soul depth, cultivation realm, teaching capability, understanding of cultivation, offering pointers, discerning flaws. In truth, it is similar to a master-teacher examination, just that it will be slightly stricter. For example, in a normal master-teacher examination, one is considered to have passed the examination just by meeting the passing requirement within a given period of time. On the other hand, the master-teacher tournament will gauge one by the duration one takes to accomplish a task, and the one who takes the shortest time will be victorious. Zhang Xian came to a realization. This was extremely similar to the competitions in his previous life. Take a normal 100-meter race for example. If A took 10 seconds whereas B took 3 days, naturally, A would be the winner. Under the pressure of time, one's mental fortitude would be put to the test. Often, there were capable master teachers who found themselves unable to perform under such stress. After explaining the matter a little longer, Zhang Xian's understanding of the master-teacher tournament deepened. In truth, the master-teacher tournament was a battlefield where different master-teachers pitted their capability against one another, and the strongest one would emerge victorious. As long as one's foundation was strong, one need not fear anything in the tournament. This was the reason why Su Shi and Ling Shi went through so much trouble to go to Tianwu Kingdom just to recruit Zhang Xian into their team. After introducing the tournament, Su Shi said, "All right, let's go to the master-teacher pavilion." Even though the tests in the selection round are likely to be different from the real tournament itself, the main idea is still there. This time, Pavilion Master Kong has come up with the tests personally. I think this will be a good experience for you to prepare for the real tournament. Nodding his head, Zhang Xian instructed Sun Chong on several matters before leaving to the master-teacher pavilion with the duo.
Chapter 527, Pavilion Master Kong. The Myriad Kingdom Alliance Master-Teacher Pavilion is the headquarter of the Master-Teacher Pavilions of the vassal kingdoms under the Alliance. It was located at a distance not too far from the Alliance head residence, and the group didn't take long to reach their destination. It was a grand building with a majestic hall. As soon as they stepped into the lounge, they immediately saw a massive statue of a person holding onto a scroll and looking into the distance. In his eyes was compassion for all living beings in the world. The sight of the statue removed all negative emotions from one, putting one into a state of calmness. Empyrean Kong Shi. Taking a brief scan of the hall, there were at least 100 people dressed in long robe here. So many master teachers. Zhang Xian was shocked. Those who were qualified to wear the long robe were master teachers who had obtained their emblems. Putting aside the ranks of the master teachers here, just the number of them was already astonishing in itself. One must know that Tianxian Kingdom didn't even have a single master teacher. And yet, there were over 100 of them here, and many of them were 2-star as well. As expected of the center of the Alliance, the cultural hub for the kingdom's fearsome. Actually, most of those master teachers aren't from Myriad Kingdom City. Every month, a 4-star master teacher conducts a lecture at the square outside the Master Teacher Pavilion, and many master teachers visit the Myriad Kingdom Alliance Master Teacher Pavilion just for this event, Su Shi explained. While the huge amount of resources flowing through Myriad Kingdom City was a reason why the cultivators here were strong, what that played a larger part to that was the presence of high-ranked master teachers. The lessons of such master teachers tended to be more insightful, and if one managed to obtain one of their tutelage jade token, one could receive tailored guidance on their cultivation, thus inducing swift improvements. In fact, it could be said that if Myriad Kingdom City didn't have this Master Teacher Pavilion, it would be impossible for so many transcendent mortal experts to appear here. Zhang Xian nodded his head in agreement as he scanned the surroundings. Not only were there many master teachers here, there were also some who came here to study. There were many chambers in the surroundings of the hall, and as long as one was willing to pay a suitable price, one could be given a one-to-one guidance session any time they wished. But of course, the higher ranked a master teacher was, the more expensive the payment would be and the more difficult it would be to make an appointment with them. After all, there were a limited number of 4-star master teachers here, and they couldn't possibly be spending all of their time on teaching others. On top of the chambers, there were also some huge auditoriums within the compound. The poorer cultivators would often attend lectures conducted in the auditoriums instead. Even though the results would be far poorer than a one-to-one guidance session, one could save quite a bit of money through opting for this instead. Thus, it is quite a popular alternative. 2-star Master Teacher Huang Chen's Zhongshe Realm Introduction Lecture still has 2 slots. Is there anyone interested in signing up? 3-star Master Teacher Bai Mu's How a Jizuan Advanced Realm Should Battle still has 3 slots. It's a small classroom of just 10 people, and it'll only cost 5 Lotir Spirit Stones. Walking through the hall, Zhang Xian could see quite a lot of people raising a board as they rallied for participants. Written on the board was the name of the master teacher, their master teacher rank, the content, and the timing of their lecture. There were many common problems that cultivators would meet within their cultivation, and based on their needs, they would sign up for the lesson they deemed most appropriate for their condition. While those who attended the lesson could copy down and repeat the content of the lecture to another, without the impartation of heaven's will, a skill exclusive to only master teachers, the same words would result in very different effects. Otherwise, if one could play the role of a master teacher just by repeating the content of a lecture, master teachers wouldn't be such a prestigious and irreplaceable occupation. The higher the tier of a kingdom, the greater the standing of a master teacher. In Myriad Kingdom City, even the Alliance head would have to treat a 4-star master teacher with utmost respect. Su Shi said as he stroked his beard, his tone carrying a tinge of pride. Being a master teacher was known as the #1 occupation in the world, and at 4-star, one was already an existence that countless people could only look up to throughout their life. Zhang Xian nodded his head. He knew about the prestigious standing of master teachers as well. If not for the immense standing of this occupation shielding him, his astonishing accomplishments would surely have caused him to be kidnapped, dissected, and experimented on for research. It was precisely because everyone knew that he was a master teacher and that he had a powerful teacher backing him that they thought it was natural for him to achieve such results. After all, a 6-star master teacher was an existence unimaginable to them. It wouldn't be surprising if a 6-star master teacher was involved in they deemed impossible. While master teachers enjoy tremendous prestige, they carry a burden equaling it as well. Back then, Kang Shi ruled that master teachers have to be a role model to the world and bring enlightenment to everyone, regardless of their background. Over the years, the Master Teacher Pavilion has expanded into all kingdoms, and the strength of the human race has indeed been brought to new heights as well. Su Shi said. While he felt proud, he knew that this was nothing for him to brag about. Rather, tied along together with it was a heavy responsibility to shoulder. What a master teacher seeks to achieve is not personal glory, but the greatness of the entire human race. The greatest honor that a master teacher could receive was to have his own students surpass him. Indeed. Zhang Xian nodded in agreement. The more he came to know about the responsibilities of a master teacher, the more he shared some thoughts. When he saw the rapid growth of his student, what he felt was no longer envy but delight. This was the essence of a teacher. There was no other occupation that was the same as this. Alright, let's not talk about this anymore. I'll take you to meet Pavilion Master Kang first before we continue on with the selection round. Shaking his head, Su Shi accounted grimly, Pavilion Master Kang is the most talented genius of our Master Teacher Pavilion for the past 100 years. He's a 4-star pinnacle master teacher, and he has a straightforward and earnest personality. He values humility, and so, when you meet him later, make sure to listen to his teachings earnestly. If you were to anger him, you might be stripped of your candidacy, so take note of what you say. Pavilion Master Kang was younger than Su Shi and Ling Shi, and he was the direct disciple of the previous Pavilion Master. Even so, he was the one who had the final say regarding the candidacy for the Master Teacher Tournament. The two of them had paid a heavy price for Zhang Xian's slot, so they couldn't allow anything to go wrong now. Don't worry. I've always been a humble person. Zhang Xian nodded earnestly. You? Humble? Su Shi and Ling Shi fell speechless. Do you think that the Master Teacher Pavilion is incapable of digging all that you've done, destroying the Master Teacher Pavilion when taking the Master Teacher examination, barging into the wall of dilemma in the Physician Guild, forcing the previous guild leader to step down, and not too long ago, you challenged the harmonious stream of flowing goblets in Honghai City and nearly caused the Appraiser Hall to close down. At the Formation Master Guild, you tore down the other party's wall. Look at your own records. Which part of it doesn't show that you're a troublemaker? And you still dare to tell us that you're humble? If you are humble, there would be no arrogant people in the world anymore. Cough cough. Try to cut down on your words when you meet Pavilion Master Kang. We'll speak for you instead. What you should focus on now is to condition yourself and prepare for the selection round later on, Ling Shi instructed. Zhang Xian nodded his head. He was delighted to be spared the hassle of talking as well. Amidst the conversation of the trio, they soon arrived outside a room. Elder Su, Elder Ling. The young man guarding outside the room clasped his fist and bowed. Is Pavilion Master Kang in? Su Shi asked. The Pavilion Master is inside, this way please. Given the other parties standing as an elder and a 4-star master teacher, the young man immediately led them in without any hesitation. Unlike the rooms allocated to the other master teacher, this one was much more spacious. Many bookshelves filled with all kinds of books were placed against the wall. A stern-looking middle-aged man was currently standing by the side of the bookshelf, browsing through a book in his hand. The young man stepped forward and bowed. Pavilion Master, Elder Su and Elder Ling are here. You're here, take a seat wherever you want. Lifting his gaze, the middle-aged man smiled. Zhang Xian turned to look at the middle-aged man. Even though the middle-aged man wasn't as advanced in age as Su Shi and Ling Shi, he exuded an incredible aura of authority. It was similar to the sensation he felt when facing a lion's head Zhao, just that it was even more intense. This was especially so for his eyes. His dark irises were deep, and they gleamed with wisdom, seemingly capable of seeing through all facade. His soul depth is probably no lower than 14. 0, Zhang Xian thought. Every 3.0 soul depth was a demarcation point. A 4-star master teacher would possess a soul depth of at least 12.0, whereas a 5-star master teacher would possess a soul depth of at least 15.0. A normal 4-star master teacher's soul depth would vary between 12.0 to 15.0, but due to the difficulty in raising one's soul depth, most 4-star master teachers only had a soul depth of around 12.0. Taking Song Chao for example, his soul depth was only 12.0. This was also why he was completely helpless against Zhang Xian's impartation of heaven's will. Even well-established 4-star master teachers like Su Shi and Ling Shi only had a soul depth of 13.0, yet, Pavilion Master Kang's soul depth was actually above 14.0. Considering his current age, as long as he didn't fall, it was just a matter of time before he becomes a 5-star master teacher. It seems like his soul depth is slightly higher than mine. After the consumption of 2 golden pages, 2 acknowledgements as a celestial master teacher, and a soul tempering of mentor's calligraphy, Zhang Xian's current soul depth had reached 14.1. However, based on his estimation, the other party's soul depth seemed to be slightly higher than his. Suddenly, a thought appeared in Zhang Xian's mind. I wonder if my impartation of heaven's will work on him. Before heading to the Soul Oracle Tomb, Zhang Xian's soul depth was only 12.1 higher than Song Chao's. Even so, he still managed to beguile the other party. In other words, as a celestial master teacher, it was easier for him to convince others through his impartation of heaven's will. Having gone through 2 acknowledgements, even though his soul depth was lower than the other party's, could his impartation of heaven's will possibly work on the other party? However, one of the requirements of using the impartation of heaven's will is to be on the side of reason. Only when one's logic is impeccable will it work. If I can't find any flaws on him, it'll be difficult for me to beguile him. Zhang Xian didn't think that he could succeed easily even though he had thought of giving it a try. The impartation of heaven's will was centered around trust and credibility. Without knowing the other party's flaws to exploit to win trust and credibility, it would be difficult for Zhang Xian to succeed. His eye of insight was ineffective given the other party's cultivation of transcendent mortal 4-dan pinnacle. Under the condition that the other party didn't execute a battle technique, it was impossible for him to uncover the flaws of the other party. These thoughts floated in Zhang Xian's mind for a moment before disappearing. Following which, Su Shi stepped forward and introduced, Pavilion Master, this is Zhang Shi whom we told you about previously. He's the 2-star master teacher who broke the records of the Tianwu Kingdom Master Teacher Examination, and you staked your all on recommending? Placing the book back onto the table, Pavilion Master Kang walked over and sat on the main seat before raising his head to assess Zhang Xian. Yes. Su Shi and Ling Shi nodded their heads. Transcendent mortal 1-dan pinnacle and a lack of discipline in his movements. With a look, it's clear that he has never practiced any battle techniques. This is the genius you two spoke of. Looking at Zhang Xian, Pavilion Master Kang frowned. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.